Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today, we're heading deep into the forgotten heart of Texas, to ghost towns where the roads are broken, the buildings are rotting, and the night hides things no one dares to speak about. These are 20 Texas ghost towns too, dangerous to visit after dark. Places where strange lights still flicker through abandoned windows, whispers echo through empty streets, and something unseen waits patiently in the shadows. Most viewers make one simple mistake: they leave without subscribing. And by doing that, they miss out on the darkest, creepiest stories we share here. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because what's waiting out there in the dark isn't going anywhere. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Here, the night is just getting started, and the horror is ready to unfold. Let's begin. You wouldn't find Helmsville on any modern map, not anymore. The name's been scrubbed clean from the highway signs, the road numbers rebranded, the town limits swallowed up by a tangle of mesquite and creeping sand. But if you know where to look, if you're the kind of fool who reads old oil field maps or listens too long to Barstool ghost stories, you can still find your way there. What you'll find when you do, well, that's between you and the dark. Helmsville had been a company town back in its time. PureTex Petroleum ran the rigs, paid the men, owned the houses. It was all tin roof homes and cracked dirt streets, baking under the endless West Texas sun. There was a bar, a post office, a filling station, and a company store where you could trade your paycheck for everything from bread to boots. Then there were the pumps, the nodding donkeys, as the old-timers called them, stretching out like black iron skeletons across the dust-flat earth, bowing to the thirsty ground over and over. Night and day they dipped their heads, sucking up the crude buried miles below, making money for men far away. In August of 1952, something went wrong. The fire started just past midnight, though no one could ever say for sure how. Some blamed sabotage, others a lightning strike, still others whispered of curses older than the oil itself. Flames climbed higher than any church steeple, black smoke blotting out the stars, heat warping the very air. By dawn, Helmsville was gone. 17 men burned alive trying to shut down the pumps. Whole families never made it out. The company packed up what equipment it could and pulled out before the ashes cooled. They left the pumps standing, too heavy to move, too damaged to bother. People stopped going out that way after that. Livestock wouldn't graze near the ruins. The soil stayed black and sour. The winds carried the stink of old smoke, even years later. When a handful of the rigs were torn down for scrap in the 60s, the crews reported strange things: tools going missing, lights flickering, the pumps moving when the engines were off. One man swore he heard breathing, slow and ragged, rising from the machinery like a sleeping giant buried deep below. By the 80s, Helmsville was folklore. Parents warned their kids off it the same way they warned them off snakes and strangers. Kids dared each other to sneak out there with flashlights and six-packs. Some came back pale and jumpy, others not at all. The sheriff's office never found anything but flattened beer cans and tire tracks fading into the dust. I didn't believe any of it. Not really. Not until my brother disappeared. Joel was always the reckless one. He had a way of chasing the dark just to see if it would blink first. Ghost towns, haunted highways. Whatever local legend you could throw a rock at, Joel would drive 200 miles just to poke at it. He called it research, said he was putting together a book. I figured he just liked feeling braver than the rest of us. He told me about Helmsville over beers on a sticky July night. Said he'd found the old roads on a petroleum survey, traced them all the way back through ranch gates and private land until he could see the pumps on satellite images, still standing, still casting long shadows. He grinned when he said, He was going out there the next night alone with his camera and a recorder. Said he wanted proof. That was the last time I saw him. When he didn't come back, I drove out there myself. I didn't tell anyone. Felt stupid enough already, chasing. After ghost stories like a fool. I figured I'd find his truck broken down, maybe stuck in a washout, and Joel off hiking somewhere in the heat like the dumb bastard he was. I followed the route he'd showed me, past rusted gates and through fence gaps, until the dirt track dissolved into nothing but dry scrub and the flat white glare of the sun. I killed the engine and listened. Nothing but wind and the tick of cooling metal. Helmsville was ahead of me. What was left of it? The buildings were mostly gone, sagging. Frames half swallowed by sand, roofs caved in, doors yawning dark. The filling station sign hung crooked, letters peeled down to ghostly outlines. Beyond them, the pumps stood in lines like patient mourners at a funeral no one would finish. Black iron, rust scabbed and stiff in the heat. Except they weren't. Stiff, I saw them move. Just a little, just enough. Heads dipping down, pausing, rising again in slow rhythm. No power lines, no engines. Just the wind and the sun and those ancient metal bones bowing to the earth. I should have turned around then. I should have left. But I thought of Joel and I went on. The ground felt strange underfoot, hollow somehow, like something deep below shifting in its sleep. The closer I got to the pumps, the louder the wind seemed to breathe. Not howl, not whistle. Breathe, in and out, dragging through unseen lungs. I called Joel's name over and over, but my voice sounded small out there. Thin, like. It couldn't get past the pumping. Like it couldn't reach him. I found his truck half buried in grit behind the old store. Keys in the ignition. Doors locked from the inside. His camera on the seat, battery dead. I broke the window to get it, hands shaking, breath fogging up in the hot air like it was winter instead of July. The recorder was still running. I listened. 2 at that night in my apartment, curtains drawn tight against the dark. Joel's voice started clear, a running commentary, laughing, calling me a coward for staying home. Then softer, then silent. For a long time, nothing but footsteps crunching gravel. Then breathing not his. Low and heavy and wet something. Too big for lungs, too old for bones. Metal groaning in rhythm. Pumps moving. Something beneath them. Waking Dot, the last thing on the tape was Joel's voice, small and cracked, whispering, "They aren't pulling oil anymore. They're feeding, they're breathing, and they're hungry." The tape ended with a sound I can't explain. Something breaking. Something opening. Something pulling him down. I never went back. I sold the camera, threw the recorder in a ditch. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind gets under the door, I swear I can still hear it. That slow, steady breathing, rising up through the cracks in the earth, waiting. Helmsville's still out there. The pumps are still moving. And if you listen close, real close, you'll hear them too. Not machines. Not anymore. Just lungs beneath the dirt, filling up again. Dagger Flats wasn't always empty. Once upon a time, it had its own high school, a bowling alley with 6 lanes, and a greasy spoon cafe that kept the coffee boiling from 5 in the morning till midnight. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other's dogs by name and where the sheriff would stop by your house if he hadn't seen your porch light on in a few nights, just to make sure you hadn't hung yourself in the barn. That all changed in '92 when they built the new stretch of highway 20 miles east. A bigger, faster road with shinier gas stations and chain restaurants that Dagger Flats couldn't compete with. Folks packed up, businesses shuttered there. Windows and the town dried out like a frog on hot pavement. Now what's left of it sits out there on the edge of the flats like a blister that won't pop. Baking under the weight of the Texas sun, forgotten by maps and mostly ignored by GPS. You could drive past the old turnoff 100 times and never notice it unless you were looking for trouble. The sign's still there, halfway collapsed into a mesquite bush. Dagger Flats, Pop, 1102. Though everyone knows that number hasn't been true in 30 years. Most don't go out that way anymore. Not unless you're lost or stupid or both. Truckers used to tell stories about the place over coffee and pie in Amarillo or Lubbock, saying how if you pulled off the road there for a piss break or a nap, your rig might not want to leave again. Tires flattened overnight, engines sputtered like they'd caught pneumonia, axles stiffened up like rigor mortis. A couple of drivers swore they'd come back from stretching their legs to find their headlights flickering like something unseen. Had been pawing at the wires under the hood. One guy, big fella out of Abilene, said he walked 10 miles to the nearest town after his truck simply refused to turn over, only to come back with a mechanic and find the damn thing sitting on 4 rims, every scrap of rubber chewed clean off the wheels like a dog had been at it. Nobody really believed him, of course. Except maybe the other truckers, because stories like that tend to get told in places where people still understand fear. I hadn't thought about Dagger Flats in years. Not until my cousin Brandon called me up last summer, babbling so fast, I thought he was drunk. He'd been out hunting arrowheads along the flats and decided to take the old road home. Something about saving gas, even though it's hard to save anything when you're running bald tires on a truck with 200,000 miles on it. Said he'd hit Dagger Flats around dusk, noticed right off how the air got weird. Not hot, not cold, not still, exactly, but heavy, like being wrapped in wet blankets. His headlights didn't seem to reach far ahead, and every time he thought he saw the edge of town, it just kept slipping further out of reach. Then his truck died. Battery. Light flicked on. Radio fizzed out. Engine coughed once, twice, then stopped dead. No cell service either, of course. Place like Dagger Flats. You're lucky if your phone doesn't melt into the dashboard from sheer spite. He said he tried to walk it. Made it about 100 yards before he realized the dirt under his boots wasn't dirt at all. Looked like road, but when he knelt down and touched it, it crumbled like ash between his fingers. Smelled burnt too, like old tires and ozone. Said he heard voices, soft and far off, like people arguing in a room you can't find the door to. He turned around to head back to the truck and realized it wasn't behind him anymore. Just gone lights in the distance then, moving slow. Not headlights. Lanterns, maybe, or torches. Figures walking between the shelves of buildings, heads down, shoulders hunched, trailing shadows long enough to lap across the horizon. He said one of them turned and looked right at him. No face. Just skin where the features ought to be, stretched smooth and tight like shrink wrap over meat. Mouth opened anyway, impossibly wide, splitting the skin from ear to ear like wet paper. Sound that came out wasn't words. Wasn't a scream either. Just noise, raw and jagged, like metal tearing or teeth grinding through bone. Brandon ran. Didn't stop until the sun was up and he hit pavement that felt real under his boots again. Never found his truck. Cops thought he torched it for the insurance, but there wasn't any sign of fire out there. And insurance don't pay out on phantom towns anyhow. He won't go near Dagger Flats now. Won't even take the highway that cuts within 50 miles of it. Drinks too much, talks too little, flinches when the radio fuzzes out. I shouldn't have gone looking. I know that now, but I did. Couple months after Brandon's call, curiosity got its hooks in me. I told myself it was bullshit, some backwater, ghost story with just enough truth in it to sound like more. I wanted to see it for myself. Left Amarillo before dawn in my beat-up Ford, half a tank of gas and a thermos of coffee writing shotgun. Followed the old maps, squinting at landmarks long gone, chasing whispers down roads that didn't look like roads anymore. Took me 5 hours to find the turnoff, and when I did, my GPS blanked out like someone had pulled the plug. First thing I noticed driving in, the way the horizon seemed wrong. Flat, sure, like most of Texas, but too flat. No distant trees or power lines, no windmills turning lazy circles against the sky. Just flat dirt stretching out like skin pulled tight over bone, all the way to the heat-shimmering edge of sight. Second thing, no birds. Not a one? Not even buzzards. I rolled into town with the windows down, listening. Wind maybe, or something like it. Not quite natural though, more like breath. Like the whole place was holding it. Buildings leaned together in slow collapse. Gas station with pumps gutted like fish. Motel with letters missing from the sign so it just read OTEL. Church with its steeple sagging like a snapped neck. Windows boarded, doors ajar. Nothing inside but darkness thick enough to feel against your skin. I stopped the truck in what might have once been the square and killed the engine. Stepped out. Ground felt soft underfoot, like walking on damp paper. Air smelled wrong. Not just old, not just empty. Sweet, almost. Like rot gone past its prime into something else entirely. My tires looked fine. Then, I walked a ways. Past the crumbling diner, past the school with glass winking in its broken teeth. Didn't see anyone, but I felt them. Eyes maybe, or the echo of them. Hard to tell where the watching ended and my imagination began. Heard something too. Footsteps that didn't match mine. Breath that wasn't mine. Whispers slipping through cracked doors. Turned back sooner than I planned. Truck sat there like a faithful dog. Tires didn't. Flattened. All four. Shredded. Down to threads like they'd been chewed. Rubber littered the dirt in strips and curls, black against the pale dust. Under the truck, something moved, slow, purposeful. I didn't stay to see what it was. Got behind the wheel and turned the key. Engine tried, failed, caught on the third go. Limped out of town at a crawl, rims sparking against the road, if you could still call it that. Didn't look back. Not once. Hit pavement proper miles later, stopped at the first open station I found. Attendant stared at my tires like I'd driven through hell itself. Didn't ask questions though. Folks around here know better. Never did. Fix that truck right. New tires go bald within weeks. Battery drains for no reason. Radio picks up nothing but static when I'm headed west. I tell myself I'll stay clear of Dagger Flats now. Leave the dead to rot in their empty town with their lanterns and they're hungry. Watching faces, but sometimes, late at night, I catch myself driving without remembering why, and the road looks awful flat ahead. There's a stretch of old highway that runs east of Abilene near the edge of nothing much. Out past the ranchland and mesquite scrub, past where the last of the sodium lights flicker out and the AM stations turn to static. Folks who still drive. Those roads late at night, mostly truckers, insomniacs, and the lost, call that patch of blacktop Lost Junction. It's not on maps anymore, hasn't been in years. You only really notice it when you've been driving too long, your mind soft from fatigue and the endless hum of tires on asphalt. And sometimes, just sometimes, you'll hear the horn, long, distant, hollow as a grave. A train horn. Even though no track has cut through that dirt since 1911. The crossing still stands, or at least something like it. Rusted gates hang on chains that sway without wind. The lights, red, cracked, dust-choked, blink when they want to, and not in any pattern that makes sense. Folks claim they've stopped at that crossing because the arms came down, though no train ever passed. Some swear they saw people too. Passengers maybe, waiting on benches made of nothing but shadows and fog. I didn't believe it either. Not until last winter. My brother Josh had a thing for ghost stories. Always chasing some forgotten place, some whispered legend. He'd drive clear across the state just to snap a picture of a rotting sign or catch a glimpse of a boarded-up depot. I think it started after Dad died. Looking for something in the dark that might answer back. I don't know. But he called. Me one night said he was headed out near Abilene, chasing down this story about a place where the train still ran, even if you couldn't see them. Sod folks went missing out there. Said he wanted to see for himself. I told him to come by my place first, get some sleep, but he laughed it off. Always did. That was the last time we spoke. When he didn't answer my calls the next day, I figured. He'd just gone out of range. He did that sometimes, disappeared into the sticks without a word. But when 2 days passed, I started calling the sheriffs out that way. Nobody had seen him. No wreck reported. His phone last pinged somewhere near, you guessed it, Lost Junction. I drove out myself. Highway 83, then east on a road so thin it didn't even have a number. Just a name half scrubbed from the sign, Redding Farm to Market. The sky was low, gray as wet cement, and the wind chased tumbleweeds across the cracked pavement. I had Josh's last voicemail playing over and over in my head. Found it. I think. Lights are on but no train. There's people here. Waiting? It's weird, man. Real weird. The signal broke up after that dot. I drove until there was nothing on either side of me but dirt and barbed wire and those dead mesquites clawing at the sky. Then, just as the sun bled out behind the hills, I saw it. The crossing. Not lit up like a carnival ghost show, just sitting there, quiet and waiting. Rusted sign. Rotting timbers where the tracks should have been. And yes, benches. Old, iron-framed. The kind you'd find at a depot 100 years ago. Only they weren't empty. Shapes sat there. Men and women, I guess. Though none of them moved. None of them seemed real. Their clothes hung limp out of time. Bonnets. Bowler hats. Suitcases that hadn't been made since before the war. They looked drained. Like smoke trapped in human form. Watching the dead. Tracks stretch off into the night. I pulled over because something told me to. Because I couldn't drive past without looking. That's when I heard it. The horn. Long low, shaking the bones in my chest. It didn't come from anywhere I could see. No lights in the dark. No engine. Just that sound rising out of the earth like something buried clawing its way up. The shadows stood. Every head turned in unison, slow as gears grinding to life after a century of rust. Faces pale, hollow, eyes black as coal. I swear they looked. Straight through me. Then the lights came, not headlights. Not lanterns. These burned red and gold, floating in the dark where no engine rolled, no track stretched. The air peeled open, that's the only way I can say it, like something slicing through reality itself. And through that wound, I saw the train. Black iron, windows glowing like furnaces. And inside, dear God, inside were faces. Pressed to glass, screaming, mouths open too wide, as if trying to swallow the night whole. The shapes on the bench stepped forward as the train slid up to them soundlessly. The door opened, steam hissed from nowhere. One by one they boarded. None looked back. None but one. A man in a conductor's coat, grinning like something dead too long to remember why it shouldn't. He raised one hand, tipped his cap to me. His mouth moved, but I heard the words clear as day inside my head. Room for one more. I got in my truck and drove. Tires screamed. Gravel spat up like buckshot behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until the highway grew thick. With lights again and the radio found voices instead of static. They found Josh's truck a week later. Parked by the crossing. Keys still in the ignition. His phone on the seat, battery dead. No sign of him. Not a trace. Just the faint echo, caught on voicemail, of a horn in the distance. I don't drive that way anymore. I don't talk about it much either. Folks around there know, though. They'll tell you if you ask. Sometimes late at night, when the wind dies and the sky turns black as oil, you'll hear it. That horn, those lights, and passengers waiting on benches made of shadows. Lost. Junction, the crossing that never sleeps. There's a stretch of dead road between Marfa and Alpine that no one really talks about anymore. Locals don't point it out on maps. Truckers don't take it even when it looks faster. And if you stop at one of the gas stations off the 90 and ask about it, the old-timers will just shake their heads and tell you to keep moving. They call it Sulphur Bend. Used to be a mining town, back when men thought there was money in digging deep into the desert rock, looking for brimstone and salt and whatever else they thought they could pull from the earth. The mines closed in. The 50s, not because they ran dry, but because the ground started to go strange. Folks said it wasn't safe anymore, though nobody could tell you exactly why. Back then, Sulphur Bend was like any other dust-bitten Texas town. One bar, one diner, one church leaning crooked over dry earth. Population maybe 200, give or take. Then something changed. Little things at first. A cow blistered like it had been laid out in the sun too long, even though it had been. Found in a shady field. A kid got burns on his feet from walking barefoot across his own front porch. People said the ground was heating up in places. Said it felt like walking over a stove, even when the air was cool. At night, blue lights started glowing behind curtained windows, not lanterns, not bulbs. Just a soft, sickly flicker, like gas. Flame catching in glass. Nobody could explain it, and after a while, nobody wanted to. People started moving out. Some packed up slow, trying to sell homes no one wanted. Others left in the middle of the night. The last to leave was the preacher. They say he nailed the church doors shut behind him and walked the long road out alone. After that, Sulphur Bend went quiet. Officially, the town doesn't exist anymore. It's not on maps. The mail won't deliver. There are no phone lines. But the place is still there. You can drive to it if you're stupid or stubborn. The road isn't marked, but if you're looking for it, you'll find it. Or maybe it finds you that the heat hits first. Not like the sun burning down on your skin. This heat comes from below. It creeps through the solace of your shoes, crawls up your legs like invisible fire ants. By the time you see the first sagging rooftops through the dust, your skin's already tight and red, like you've been standing too close to an open oven. Then come the windows. Every house, every building, even the hollowed-out shells of the old gas station and schoolhouse, there's blue light flickering behind the glass. No movement, just the light. Like something slow breathing just beneath the surface. People who've been stupid enough to walk into Sulphur Bend say the same thing. The air ripples. Like heat coming off asphalt, but heavier, thicker, like it's pressing down on you. Stay too long and your skin starts to hurt. Blisters rise under your clothes. Hair singes at the roots. I knew a guy once, a drifter named Carl, who tried to sleep there one night. He thought all the ghost stories were crap, just old folks trying to scare tourists. They found him the next morning curled up on the church steps, naked, skin bubbled and peeling like overcooked meat. He didn't remember a thing or so, he said. Just kept mumbling about the lights in the windows and how he couldn't find the door. Thing is, there's no fire, no smoke, no smell of burning wood or plastic, just heat. Heat and that blue light. Some say it's gas trapped underground, leaking up in invisible waves. Some say it's something older, something alive, deep under the cracked earth. I don't. No, I just know what I've seen. I went there once. Not on purpose. I was driving back from El Paso late, trying to cut time. My GPS froze up. I took a wrong turn and found myself on a road I didn't recognize, a road that wasn't there on the map. And then I saw it, the town, just sitting there in the dust like it had been waiting. I didn't stop. I wasn't that dumb. But even driving past, I felt it. The way the steering wheel got hot under my hands. The way the tires hissed on pavement like they were melting. The way the blue light followed me in the mirrors long after I'd left the buildings behind. I didn't tell anyone at first. Who would believe me? But I couldn't forget it either. The light, the heat, the empty windows burning like gas lamps with no flame. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if the town ever really let me leave. My skin's never been right since. I sunburn easy now, even in the shade. My hands peel in the winter like I've been working with lye. And sometimes, when I wake up in the dark, I see that flicker under the door. Blue light, soft and slow, like something breathing just beyond the threshold. I don't open the door anymore. Not at night. Not ever. They say no one lives in Sulphur Bend, but they're wrong. Something lives there. Something that doesn't need food or water or air. Something that's patient. Something that burns without fire. And if you stay too long, if you let it touch you, it doesn't forget. It follows, it waits. It finds ways to come home with you. You ever been through Whistler's Gap? Most folks haven't. It's not on any real map, not unless you know the roads well enough to notice which ones don't get paved anymore. The kind of place where cell phones don't work and gas stations haven't been open in 20 years. Old logging roads and rusted-out cattle fences, half-fallen barns tilting into weeds. I drove through it once, long time ago now, and I only stayed the one night. That was enough. That was all it took. It started like this. The engine in my old truck ran hot coming out of Lubbock, and by the time I hit those lonely hills past Sweetwater, I knew I wasn't making it to Amarillo before dark. The radiator needle was kissing red, and every little rattle started sounding like a death knell. I pulled off at the first break in the scrubland I saw, a dusty little turnoff with a hand-painted sign nailed crook to a post. Whistler's Gap. No population listed. No services mentioned. Just the name, like a warning or a dare. The road wound up through dry gullies and under dead tree limbs that clawed at the sky like blackened fingers. By the time I saw the lights of what passed for a town, the sun was bleeding itself out behind. The hills and the sky looked bruised and heavy. One gas station, boarded up. A grocery store with letters falling off the sign, Mixiela Grok Re. A post office the size of a tool shed. And a little further on, a motel squatting on the edge of a dry creek bed. Its neon sign flickering like it was dying slow. Vacancy. There wasn't another option. Not unless I wanted to sleep in the cab and pray coyotes didn't chew through. The tires inside, the motel looked like every other forgotten roadside dump faded carpet. Wallpaper peeling in strips, a vending machine buzzing to itself like an insect with a head injury. The woman behind the counter was pale and too thin, her eyes big in her hollow face. She slid the key across without a word, just nodded when I asked about food and pointed toward the vending machine. Room 12, far corner. Facing out toward the hills where the land turned black after sunset. It wasn't until I was unlocking the door that I noticed the sound. Whistling. Soft at first. Far off, a long, tuneless note dragged out like somebody exhaling through cracked teeth. It wasn't music. It wasn't happy. Just one long, eerie whistle, and then footsteps, slow, measured, gravel crunching under something heavy. I stopped. Listened hard. The wind out here could do strange things. Echoes, maybe. A barn door slamming shut somewhere miles away. That's what I told myself. I went inside, locked the door, turned on the TV, got static. Tried the lamp. It flickered once and died. That's when I noticed the room. Key had something scratched into the plastic. Listen close after dark. Not exactly a welcome note. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank TV, listening. The footsteps circled. The motel, slow and steady, gravel popping under their weight. Every so often, the whistling came again. Always the same. One long note, no melody, no joy. It sounded tired. It sounded patient. By midnight, I hadn't heard a car. Hadn't seen headlights. Hadn't heard a voice other than my own when I cursed at the broken TV. Just the footsteps, circling, circling. And now and then, the whistle. Sleep didn't come easy. I sat up most of the night with my back to the headboard, staring at the door, watching the shadow of feet pause outside now and then. I couldn't see anyone, just the shape, black under the porch light, standing still like it was listening to me breathe. And then it would move on, slow and steady, crunching the gravel beneath those heavy, deliberate steps. When the sun came up, the shadow was gone. I checked outside, no footprints. Dust lay smooth as glass. The clerk was gone too. Lobby empty, door swinging on its hinge like it had been opened too fast and forgotten. I didn't see another soul as I packed up. Prayed the truck would hold together long enough to get me out of that place. At the edge of town, I stopped. Another sign, this one hand-carved and newer than the rest, driven into the cracked earth like a marker on a grave. Everyone hears him. Nitrogen monoxide, one sees him. Don't. Stay 2 nights. The truck made it as far as Amarillo before the radiator blew for. Good. I sold it for scrap, took a bus the rest of the way home. I never went back through Whistler's Gap, never even looked for it again. Some nights, though, when the wind gets under the house just right and the floors creak like old bones, shifting in sleep, I hear it again. Footsteps, gravel under heavy boots. A whistle, long and tuneless and tired. Like something just passing by, moving slow, waiting for someone to notice. They say no one's ever seen the whistling man. Only heard him, walking the circles he's walked 1,000 nights before, waiting for someone foolish enough to stay twice. Me, I figure once was more than enough. Most people in Texas don't know about Carrion Ridge. You'd think they would after all. It's not every day a whole town dies off in a single season and the buzzards stayed to keep watch over the bones, but somehow it's never mentioned. On maps and newspapers or in those little books tourists pick up at gas stations about ghost towns you should visit this summer. No, Carrion Ridge isn't like Bodie or Terlingua. There's no cracked plaques or novelty postcards. It's the kind of place you hear about from a man who drinks too much and talks too long on the wrong side of midnight. The kind of place you don't write down, because writing it down makes it real. The plague hit in the spring of 1903. That's what folks say, those few who know the story. It wasn't yellow fever or cholera or any of the regular sorts of death. That come knocking. Nobody knew what it was. People just started bleeding from places you're not supposed to bleed from: eyes, ears, under their fingernails. Skin turned gray and shiny like wet leather. The children went first, then the old, and then everyone else. By June, Carrion Ridge was done, empty. Except it wasn't really empty. Not then, not now. The buzzards came before the people were even buried. Hundreds of them, big and black with those wrinkled pink faces like something God forgot to finish making. They circled and landed and picked at whatever they could find. The strangest thing, they never left. Not for a day. Not in the 100+ years since. Locals say you can drive past on Route 79 and look out your window and see them, perched like gargoyles on the crumbling courthouse roof, lining the telephone wires that haven't carried a voice in decades. They say the birds watch you. They follow you with eyes too human to be natural. They wait. I wouldn't know if that's true. At least I wouldn't have known if not for my cousin, Andy. Andy liked to poke around places he shouldn't. He was one of those guys who thought urban exploration was some kind of spiritual calling. Ghost towns, collapsed mines, burned out hospitals. He had a camera and a YouTube channel and way too much free time. I told him not to go to Carrion Ridge. Hell, I begged him. But Andy always did have to learn things the hard way. Last text he sent me was a picture. Grainy and dark, like he'd taken it through a filthy window or maybe through the lens of a gas mask. It showed a house ordinary at first glance. Sagging porch, paint peeled off in long white curls, chimney leaning like a drunk about to fall. But there was something wrong about it, something I didn't catch until the third or fourth time I looked. The roof wasn't just sagging under rot, it was sagging under weight. A dozen, maybe 24 buzzards crouched there, staring at something below. Andy's caption read, "They're watching the house, not me." That was 4 days ago. No one's heard from him since. I should have left it alone. Should have written him off as another dumbass who wandered into trouble he couldn't handle. But Andy was family. You don't leave family hanging, even when they're stupid. So I packed a bag, told work I was taking a few days, and drove east until the roads stopped having names and the signs stopped bothering to point anywhere. Carrion Ridge doesn't announce itself. You just notice, after a while, that there's no other cars, no gas stations. The road narrows and cracks and the grass grows higher. Trees thin out and the sky presses lower. And then you're there, without realizing it. A sunken collection of dead houses slouching into the earth like they're tired of pretending to stand. Roads choked with weeds. Windows either gaping open or covered over with planks that have been nailed in from the inside. And the birds, my God, the birds. They were everywhere. Lining fences, perching atop rusted trucks, stalking in the streets like they owned them. I drove slow, heart knocking hard enough to make my vision pulse at the edges. Every single one of them turned to watch me pass. Heads pivoted in perfect time, following the crawl of my car. No flapping, no cawing, no movement except that slow, deliberate turning. It felt like driving through a town populated by 1,000 silent judges, and I couldn't help but wonder what sentence they thought I deserved. I parked near what used to be the general store. If the faded sign could be trusted, the air smelled of old paper, rot, and something sharp beneath it like meat gone bad a long time ago but still trying to pretend it was fresh. I called Andy's name more times than I care to admit. Nothing answered but the creak of a door swinging somewhere. I couldn't see. My phone had no bars. My watch said it was noon, but the light had a strange, sour quality to it. Like dusk was squeezing in ahead of schedule. The house from Andy's photo was easy to find. Not because it stood out, it looked like all the others more or less, but because the birds marked it. Dozens of them on the roof, staring straight down at the door like they were waiting for something to come out. None of them looked at me. Not even when I stepped onto the porch and pushed open the door. Inside, the air was heavier, thicker. Dust hung in strands you could have played cat's cradle with. Furniture slumped beneath sheets yellowed and stiff with age. A grandfather. Clock leaned in a corner, stopped at 3:33. Every floorboard groaned like it hated me. I found Andy's backpack in what might have been a sitting room once. His camera, too, though the screen was cracked and black. A notebook lay open beside it, pages smeared with dirt and something darker. I'll tell you what it said. Not all of it. I'm not writing a confession, just a warning, but enough. They're not birds, not really. They wear the shape because it's easy. Because no one looks too close at something they think is just nature doing what nature does. But they've been here long before the town. Before the people who built it. Before the ones who died here. Watching, waiting, feeding. They circle because they're bound. They perch because they're patient. But inside this house, inside, they don't have to pretend anymore. The last entry was just 3 words. Scrawled like he couldn't get them down fast enough. Something in basement. I should have left then. Should have run. But people don't make good choices in places like Carrion Ridge. Curiosity gets under your skin like ticks, burrows deep, whispers that you have to see. You have to know. So I found the door to the basement. The birds on the paths. Roof shuffled, feathers rasping against shingles like dry leaves. It wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. Things like that never are. The stairs went down farther than they should have, deeper than a house like this could logically contain. The air got colder, wetter. I heard sound scratching, breathing not my own, a low rustle like pages turning without hands. And then I saw, well, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. Not fully. But I'll say this, the birds weren't watching the house because they were guarding it. They were waiting for what was beneath to come back out. And what was beneath wasn't done with Andy. Not by a long shot. I made it out somehow. I don't remember how, not clearly. I remember running, tripping, hands bleeding, something following me up the stairs with teeth like broken glass and eyes like pits scraped clean of light. I remember the birds rising all at once, black wings blotting out what little sun remained, screaming in voices too thick and wet to belong to anything that ever hatched from an egg. I don't know how I got to my car. I don't know how I got home. I only know this. I can't stop hearing them. Not cawing, speaking, whispering, circling. Outside now, perched on the power lines, watching my house, watching me. They never leave. Nobody ever really talks about Black Hollow anymore. Not in town, not at church, not even in whispers. Folks have learned to steer their conversations around it the way a man steers his truck around a dead dog in the road. Slow, careful, with a silent kind of disgust. But everyone remembers it, and everybody knows someone who's been there, whether they admit it or not. That's how these places survive, isn't it? Not through stories, but through silence. Through the gaps between words. Through the spaces. Where truth festers. It's just a stretch of woods a few miles south of town, really. Nothing remarkable if you're just passing through. A crooked gravel road winds in and spits you out at a rusted cattle gate that doesn't guard anything anymore. Beyond that, trees. Oaks, mostly. Old ones, thick around the middle, their trunks blistered and bruised with dark patches where the bark never grew back right. In the daylight, if you squint hard enough, they look like any other trees. But by dusk, well, that's when folks say the crying starts. I'd heard about Black Hollow all my life. My granddad used to mutter about it when he thought no one was listening. Said the land was cursed long before white men set foot on it. Said the Comanche wouldn't even ride through, not even when they were drunk or half mad with hunger. My daddy called it a load of horse shit, but he never took us hunting out that way either. Said the deer tasted wrong if they'd been feeding near those trees. Said their meat came off gray, like something already rotting from the inside out. So we hunted elsewhere, still. When you're young and stupid and trying to impress the kind of girl who likes to smoke menthols behind the bleachers, stories like that sound more like dares than warnings. That's how I ended up out there the first time. I was 17, high on cheap whiskey and cheaper courage, and I wanted to show Rachel Morton I wasn't afraid of some trees. I should have known better. We all should have died. It was late, past midnight, when we cut the engine and let the truck roll to a stop just inside the gate. I remember how quiet it felt, even with the cicadas still humming and something big splashing around in the creek not far off. The air was heavy, wet with the kind of heat that doesn't cool down just because the sun's gone. Rachel lit another cigarette and smiled like she wasn't scared. But she was. I could see it in the way her hand shook when she brought it to her lips. We didn't hear the crying at first. Not exactly. It started more like a sigh, soft and slow, rising up from the ground itself. The kind of sound you feel more than hear. Deep in your chest, like a church organ hitting just the right note. Rachel thought it was the wind, but the leaves weren't moving. Not even a little. That's the part that still gets me after all these years. Not the crying, not the sap, not what we saw later. Just the stillness. The absolute refusal of those trees to bend, to breathe, to sway the way trees are meant to. We walk deeper in because that's what you do when you're young and too dumb to know how to listen to your gut. The grass got thinner beneath our feet, the dirt beneath it black as tar and sticky in a way dirt shouldn't be. Rachel pointed it out first, the sap. Thick rivulets running down the trunks like veins, some fresh and glistening, others dried to a crusty scab. It smelled wrong. Sweet at first, like molasses left too long in the sun, but under that, something sour, something metallic. Something like blood. She wanted to turn back then, I think. I should have let her. God knows, I should have. But I laughed because that's what boys do when they're scared, and I told her she was hearing things, seeing things. I told her trees didn't cry, that stories were just stories. I told her bodies don't bleed up through their own graves. And then we heard it. Clear this time. A low, wet sob from somewhere just ahead. Not an animal, not the wind, not our minds playing tricks. A voice. Human. Hurting. Rachel grabbed my arm so tight her nails left marks. I told her it was probably some drunk, maybe a vagrant sleeping it off. She didn't answer. Just pointed. There was something ahead of us, half hidden by a bend in the trail. At first, I thought it was a man, hunched over and rocking like folks do when grief's got them by the throat. But the shape of it was wrong. Too thin in places, too thick in others, its limbs wrapped around the base of one of those bleeding trees like roots trying to pull themselves back underground. I called out, because again, I was an idiot. Asked if they needed help. Asked if they were hurt. The head turned slow as winter coming on, and I saw that it didn't have a face the way you or I do. Just a smooth stretch of skin where eyes should have been. A mouth that opened too wide, too wet, leaking more of that black stuff down its neck. And from that mouth came the sobbing, louder now, sharper, almost angry. Rachel screamed. The thing answered. I don't remember running, not really. I remember falling, hands scraping through mud that wasn't mud, pulling up globs of something slick and fibrous, something that clung to me like a living thing. I remember Rachel ahead of me, her white sneakers soaked black halfway up her calves, her breath coming in panicked gasps. I remember the trees closing in, their branches bending low even though there wasn't a wind. I remember that sound, rising behind us like a tide, not just one voice now, but dozens, hundreds, all weeping. We made it to the truck. Barely. The engine wouldn't turn over at first, like it knew we weren't supposed to leave. Rachel cried. I swore. I slammed my fist against the dash until something gave way, and then we were moving, spinning gravel behind us. Those voices chasing us all the way to the county road. She never spoke to me again after that. Moved out of state the following summer. Can't say I blamed her. I went back once, years later. Couldn't help myself. People say curiosity kills cats, but it does a number on men too. I parked in the same spot, killed the lights, waited for the crying to start. It didn't take long. I thought maybe I'd see it again. That face with no eyes, that mouth leaking sorrow like a wound that wouldn't close. But there was nothing this time. Just trees, standing silent and still, bleeding in the dark. I touched one, just to be sure. My fingers came away sticky, stained black. They say trees remember. I believe it. Those oaks are older than sin, older than the bones buried beneath them, older than the stories we tell to keep the dark at bay. They don't forget. They don't forgive. They just keep on weeping. and somewhere beneath their roots, something weeps with them still. They say the road into Mesa Grande looks like any other lonely stretch of West Texas blacktop. Dry scrub on both sides, mesquite trees leaning away from the wind, fences strung with barbed wire that hasn't held anything in for decades. Sun bleaches the sky white, and the heat haze turns the distant hills into something soft and unreal. But if you keep driving, if you keep ignoring the way your engine temperature creeps up, even though the gauge says there's nothing wrong, if you keep brushing off the soft stutter in the radio, even when it's turned off, you'll eventually find yourself there. Or it'll find you. Either way, you'll come to understand too late why people in these parts drive the long way around, adding an hour or two to their trip rather than risk passing through Mesa Grande. The map says there's a town. Population 412, though no one's updated that sign in years. The sign itself is faded, riddled with bullet holes, leaning like a drunk trying to stay upright. You pass it almost without realizing Mesa Grande Est, 1887. Population scratched out and illegible beneath the rust. Then comes the feeling. Not fear, not at first. Just a weight in your chest, like a hand pressing down slow and steady. A silence, deeper than it should be, settling into the bones of your car and making everything sound. Distant, like you're already underwater. I wasn't the first fool to roll in there thinking I'd just gas up and go. Hell, I didn't even mean to stop. I was heading west, aiming to make it to El Paso by nightfall, but somewhere after Fort Stockton, my GPS blinked out and my phone showed no service. Just like that, empty signal bars and a map frozen halfway between here and nowhere. I should have trusted my gut and turned back. I should have taken that unease more seriously. But pride makes a man stupid, and I figured I could muscle through. The road signs pointed ahead. Mesa Grande, 15 miles. I told myself a Coke, a tank of gas, maybe a piss break, that'd be it. I didn't need more than that. I never thought about the stories I'd heard growing up. Half-left whispers about places out here where cars disappeared. Engines died like clockwork, and radios didn't play music but static and voices calling from somewhere far away. Somewhere that didn't sound like Earth. The first thing to go was the air conditioning. 1 minute blowing strong, the next just a breath of heat thick as soup. Then the radio fizzed, cutting in and out, not stations' voices. A woman crying, soft and garbled. A man muttering something I couldn't make out. It sounded wrong, like it wasn't meant for me, like I was overhearing something private and ugly. Then the dash lights blinked and the engine coughed. Not a stall. Not yet. Just a stammer, like the car had suddenly forgotten how to be a car. The road bent gently to the right, and there it was ahead. Mesa Grande. I knew it wasn't right even before I crossed whatever invisible line marked its boundary. There's a kind of rot that doesn't show on the outside. A sickness in the bones of a place. That's what Mesa Grande felt like. The pavement grew rougher, patchy. The yellow lines faded to nothing. The storefronts looked deserted, but not abandoned. It was worse than that, like people had just stepped away moments before I showed up. Left things sitting where they were, lights still on in the diner even though there were no cars in the lot, chairs pushed back from tables as if someone had, stood up mid-bite and walked out into the dust. Pulled into a gas station because the engine made it clear I wasn't going any further. The sign said Harlan's Fuel and Feed, but the pumps looked ancient. Cracked hoses looped like dead snakes. Glass faces clouded over with grime. I sat there with the motor idling rough, watched the fuel gauge dip faster than it should have. Like the gas was leaking out, but there wasn't a drop beneath the car. Then the engine died. I didn't even try to start it again. Some part of me understood that was over. I stepped out into heat so thick it felt solid. Flies hovered in the air, barely moving, like they'd given up trying to live. I walked to the station door, found it unlocked, the bell above jangling weakly as I stepped. Inside, the place smelled like old grease and dust, but there were signs of life or something like it. A half-empty coffee cup on the counter, lipstick print on the rim, a register open, a drawer full of faded bills. Shelves stocked with canned beans, motor oil, maps so outdated they might as well have been printed on stone tablets. Behind the counter, a CB radio crackled. At first it sounded normal, if static and occasional clicks could be called normal. Then the voice came through. "Can anyone hear me? I'm still here. Please, I'm still here." A man's voice, thin, panicked, like he was trapped somewhere small and dark. I backed away. Something moved past the window outside fast enough. I only caught a blur, a shape wrong in proportion. Long arms, legs bent strange. Mesa Grande doesn't eat people, not right away. It eats cars first. That's how it keeps you. No way out. Tires rot. Batteries melt. Metal warps like plastic. Left on a stove. I walked the lot behind the station and found proof enough cars left in neat rows, hooed up, engines gutted like carcasses picked clean. Some new, some so old they belonged in a museum. Radio still hummed in some of them. One, a battered sedan, had a woman's purse in the passenger seat, lipstick rolling loose beneath. I leaned in, foolish curiosity, and the radio snapped to life. Don't trust them. Don't eat. Don't drink. Don't sleep. A woman's voice again, close enough to feel breath on my ear. I jerked back so hard I fell. When I stood, something was watching me from the alley between the station and the laundromat next door. Eyes. Pale, lidless, too many. I didn't run. Not yet. I walked slow, back toward my car, keeping my eyes down. I remembered stories don't. Meet its gaze, don't answer its questions, don't acknowledge the whispers. If you do, it knows you're listening. The whispers came anyway. From under the car, from inside the vents. Stay. 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 I opened the driver's door. My keys lay on the seat, melted to slag. The thing in the alley stepped closer. Not a man. Not anymore. Something wearing skin wrong, stretched too thin over angles that didn't belong to bones. It smiled, or tried to. Teeth like nails driven into gums. I slammed the door, locked it out of habit, though I knew locks didn't matter. The radio clicked on without power. Still here. Still here. Still. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, it was night. Mesa Grande doesn't have time the way the rest of the world does. Hours stretch and fold. I hadn't meant to sleep, but I must have. The lot was darker, emptier. The thing was gone. For now, lights burned in the diner across the street. I walked toward them because I couldn't think what else to do. Inside, people sat at tables, unmoving. Not dead. Not alive either. Faces slack, mouths open like waiting to scream. Behind the counter, a woman poured coffee into cups that never filled. Again and again, her hands trembling. She looked at me once, and in her eyes was a scream so loud I heard it without sound. "You're caught now," she said. The others didn't speak. They only turned to look together in perfect silence. I left. I ran. Back to my car. Back to the useless engine and the dead battery. Back to the weight in my chest and the whispers crawling beneath my skin. The road out wasn't there anymore. Just rows of cars, stacked and crumbling. Bones of steel and rubber and glass stretching into the dark. Somewhere in the distance, an engine turned over. A car starting. A voice on the radio calling for help. Mesa Grande doesn't let you leave. Eventually, you stop trying. Eventually, you join the others. I'm still here. I'm still here. Please, I'm still here. The old church sat in the dead center of Ashford, Texas, a little speck of a town so dried up and emptied out that even the weather seemed to have given up on it. Every storefront was boarded up, every house sagged with the weight of years. Only the wind still wandered the streets. Only the church still stood proud. That was its nickname even back when people still cared. Devil's Ladder. Folks said the steps leading up to it weren't for saints and never had been it hadn't been used for services in decades. No weddings, no funerals, no bake sales. They said no preacher could last there long. They said every last one either went crazy or disappeared. People didn't talk about it much anymore, not openly. Most figured it was best to just leave it alone. But it was still there, waiting with its doors always unlocked after dark. Some kids had gone in on dares over. The years, sure. You could hear the stories if you asked the right person at the right bar. Kids who went inside and came back pale and silent. Kids who heard voices that never stopped whispering in their heads afterward. Kids who didn't come back at all. Sheriff. Grady once found a dog tied to the altar, gutted from throat to belly like a fish. That was years ago, and even Grady didn't like to talk about it now. The town had decided, quietly, to pretend the church wasn't there. But towns don't bury things right. Not for long. Ethan Langley wasn't from Ashford. He was from Houston originally, moved out here for reasons he couldn't quite explain except to say he was tired of people. Tired of crowds, tired of traffic, tired of feeling like one more mouth in a city too loud to listen. Ashford suited him just fine. He liked the quiet. He liked the emptiness. The isolation felt clean somehow, like scrubbing a wound, but even. Loners get curious. He'd heard about the church from Darlene, the waitress who poured his coffee at the diner. She told him about it like she was warning him about a sinkhole. You see it, you walk the other way. Don't matter how harmless it looks. She said people went in at night and sometimes didn't come out again until morning, if at all. Said you could hear sermons inside, even though no preacher had stood there in years. Ethan had smiled, said it sounded like a ghost story to keep kids from breaking windows, but something about it stuck in his head. The way things do when you're alone too long. He started noticing it more when he drove through town, how it sat. Like a stone at the heart of everything, crooked steeple clawing at the sky. Windows like black eyes. Door always slightly open after dark. One night he couldn't help himself. He parked his truck on the curb, left the keys in the ignition, engine idling like it might still save him. He told himself he'd just take a look, in and out, 5 minutes. Curiosity killed the cat, sure, but satisfaction brought it back. He stepped up onto the porch. The boards groaned under his weight. The door swung wider without him touching it. The air inside was colder than it had any right to be, heavy and wet like lungs after drowning. He hesitated. The wind behind him stopped breathing. He stepped. Inside. The door clicked shut behind him. At first, it was just darkness. His eyes adjusted slowly to shapes. Pews lined up like rotting teeth, pulpit still standing at the front like a mouth waiting to open. The stained glass behind it had been shattered long ago, jagged remnants catching what little moonlight there was like blades. The smell was thick, mold, old wood, something metallic underneath. The kind of smell that said nothing living belonged here anymore. Then he heard it, a voice. Deep, slow, crawling through the air like oil. Not preaching exactly, not the way he remembered from his mama's church back home. This voice didn't speak of love or sin. It didn't offer salvation or warn of hellfire. It just spoke. Words. That didn't sound like words. A rhythm older than English, older than anything with skin or blood. He turned toward the pulpit. There was someone there. A shape, tall, thin, wearing what might have once been robes but now hung in strips like peeling wallpaper. No face, just shadow. The mouth moved and the sound came out, and Ethan felt something shift inside his chest. Something like hands pulling at his ribs, prying them open to make room for something else. He backed away. His hands found the door. He tried the knob. It wouldn't turn. The voice stopped. Slowly, the thing behind the pulpit looked at him. Not with eyes, not with any face at all, but Ethan felt it like a spotlight pinning him in place. The pews creaked. Something moved in the dark between them. Shapes rising up, taking their seats. Figures in black, featureless, turning empty faces. Toward the altar, toward him. The sermon began again. He ran to the windows. Tried them, nailed shut. The back door? Gone. Only walls where it should have been. He shouted, pounded, cursed. The voice rose, louder now, filling the church like floodwater. His ears bled. His teeth ached. His bones felt soft, bending under. The weight of the sound. Somewhere behind him, a door opened. Not one he could see, but one he could feel. Something stepped through it. Something bigger than the church, bigger than the sky, wearing skin made of screams and eyes like burned-out stars. It moved closer with every word spoken from that pulpit mouth. He couldn't look. He knew if he looked, it would be inside him. If he looked, he wouldn't be Ethan anymore. So he shut his eyes and pressed his hands to his ears, and he knelt on the cold, rotted floor, and he waited. When dawn came, the door creaked open behind him. Light spilled in, soft and clean. The thing was gone. The pews were empty again. The pulpit stood silent. He stumbled out into the morning, blinking against the sun like a man reborn from the grave. His truck was still there, engine dead, battery drained to nothing. He left town that day. Didn't pack, didn't say goodbye. Just drove until the highway gave way to other towns with other ghosts. But he still hears the sermon sometimes in the quiet between sleep and waking. Words that don't sound like words. Promises older than skin. Doors waiting to open. And he knows. One night they will open again. For him. Hawks Crossing wasn't even a real town anymore. The sign still stood, crooked on rusted poles, half sunk into weeds so high they practically scraped the bellies of passing trucks. Nobody lived there, not anymore. Not since the fires, not. Since the disappearances, not since folks started hearing things moving up above, scraping the clouds with wings too big to belong to anything natural. They said it used to be a farming town. Cotton fields out to the horizon, pecan orchards heavy, with fruit, a feed store, a diner, a church that held more ghosts than prayers by the end of it. Folks went to church with birdshot in their pockets back then, because the birds had started acting strange long before the people caught on. The last family to live in Hawks Crossing packed up one night in '93, left their porch light burning, like a useless beacon in the dark. People said they didn't make it as far as the next county. Said their truck was found a week later, out on County Road 11, doors open. Groceries spilled across the asphalt like a breadcrumb trail for something. Too big to need directions. No bodies inside. Not then. The thing you have to understand about Hawks Crossing is this. You don't look up. Not after dark. Not when the wind dies and the clouds come low, pressing the sky flat like a lid over something boiling beneath. You keep your head down, you keep moving, and if you hear wings, big wings, heavy enough to stir the dust off the road, you do not run. Running only makes them curious. I wasn't born there. I didn't even grow up close. My daddy was from Amarillo, my mom from some dust pit outside Lubbock. Hawks Crossing was just a name on a map to me until the night my cousin Joel went missing. He'd been working a contract job, hauling scrap from a defunct grain mill not far from there. Said the money was good, the hours shit, and the sky strange. His last voicemail said, plain as day, they're up there watching. Big as houses. Bigger, not birds. Never were birds. They found his truck parked halfway into a ditch, radio hissing static, driver's door wide open. His boots sat side by side on the shoulder like he'd stepped right out of them. No footprints going forward. Nothing but scorched earth in a wide, perfect circle around the truck, like something huge had come down out of the sky and blotted out everything beneath it. So I went looking. I didn't tell anyone. My girlfriend would have called me stupid. My mother would have cried. My brother would have offered to come along and gotten himself killed too. I figured it was a solo kind of mistake. Packed light. Flashlight, hunting knife, flask of whiskey. Notebook to keep my nerves straight. I rolled into Hawks Crossing after sundown because I'm an idiot who doesn't know how to read his own warnings. I thought I'd just scope it out from the edges, maybe find Joel's boots, maybe get drunk enough to forget why I came. The sky was clear when I pulled over, full of more stars than I'd seen in years, but something felt wrong. Too quiet. No crickets, no wind, and not a single bird. You don't realize how loud birds are until they're gone. I parked beneath that sagging town sign and killed my headlights. My phone already had no signal. The fields ahead were black as tar, and even with my flashlight sweeping the grass, I couldn't see more than 20 feet. I kept thinking I heard something wings, breath, but when I looked up, there was nothing. Just stars. I walked out the road dipped and curved, lined with dead trees leaning like old drunks over the ditches. I passed what must have been the diner once, windows broken out, booths collapsed inward like rotten teeth. Across from it, the church steeple leaned northward, finger pointed forever at nothing. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Some places keep their sickness pressed tight to the walls, and you can feel it without crossing the threshold. Ahead, something loomed in the dark. Not a building. Not natural either. My light barely touched it, and what it showed didn't make sense. Smooth, black, curving up and over like the belly of something impossibly large. It shimmered like oil under the weak beam of my flashlight. I thought it was a water tower until it moved. The air above me shifted. Sighed, settled heavier. They say your instincts kick in when you're close to death, but mine were too busy screaming. To give good advice, I didn't run. I couldn't. My legs wouldn't work. My mouth was open, but no sound came out. Overhead, something blotted out the stars. Not for long. Just a sweep of shadow, a vast ripple of darkness that passed too low, too slow. Not wind, not wings. Something deeper. Something heavier. It passed. I breathed again. My flashlight flickered and died. In the dark, I could still feel it. Not looking at me. Looking down. Waiting. Watching. I don't remember how I got back. To my truck. Not really. My next clear memory is slamming the door shut, fumbling with the keys, turning the engine over and over while something huge moved through the field behind me, cracking saplings like matchsticks. I didn't look back. I drove. Fast. Too fast. When I hit pavement again, I almost cried. I didn't stop until Amarillo, and by then, the radio was working again, and the sky looked normal, and birds were back on the wires like nothing had happened. Joel's. Never been found. His boots, his truck, sure, but not him. Not his bones. Not a single hair. And every now and then, I check the satellite images of Hawks Crossing. Sometimes there's a blur over it, a shadow stretched too wide, too sharp-edged to be a cloud. Sometimes I drive past the old county road just to remind myself how close I came. You don't look up there. Not if you want to stay, because what's up there? It's not birds. It never was. They say Dry Fork hasn't seen real water since the year Kennedy got shot. Not a trickle, not a storm big enough to fill the wide, cracked riverbed that cuts through town like a scar across brittle skin. Used to be a fishing place, so they say. Used to be a town where folks brought their kids to learn how to swim, where men took beers down to the water's edge and came back with stringers heavy with catfish. Now it's nothing but parched dirt, clawed by mesquite roots and littered with sun-bleached bones that might have belonged to cattle. Or maybe not. Dry Fork sits quiet between nowhere and forgotten. If you blink driving past on Route 36, you'll miss it. Just a collapsed gas station with the pumps rusted through like honeycombs. A post office someone torched back in '82, and the bones of a church eaten alive by termites and heat. And, of course, the riverbed. The fork, stretched out wide and yawning, split through the earth like an open mouth waiting to swallow something down. Nobody lives there anymore. Not really. A drifter might hang his hat for a night, though he won't stay long. Hunters pull through now and then, poking around for hogs or deer, but they don't camp close. Not after dark. Not near the fork. See, the stories go like this. Folks say when the moon's wrong, big and swollen, sitting low like a blood blister. On the horizon, you can hear water. Not the dry wind rattling through mesquite. Not coyotes loping by on cracked paws. Water, splashing, steady and slow, like someone wading knee-deep through something cold and thick. Sometimes laughing, sometimes gasping, and sometimes screaming, though those sounds don't last long. Sheriff. Bell used to drive out there, back when there still was a Sheriff Bell. He'd park his cruiser by the old bridge and listen with his lights off, chewing on toothpicks and spitting into the dirt. Nothing there, he told my daddy once. Ain't no river. Ain't no water. Ghosts maybe, or drunks, or coyotes fallen in a hole. But Sheriff Bell's cruiser got found empty one July morning, door swung wide, engine ticking itself. Cool. His prints led from the gravel lot down into the fork's belly and just stopped halfway across the dust. Stopped like he stepped off something solid into something deep. They never found him. After that, folks stopped going near it. Except for the kids, of course. Kids are stupid. Kids don't listen. Last summer, one of those amateur ghost hunting outfits came through. You know the type. YouTube morons with GoPros strapped to their heads and cheap liquor sloshing in the cooler. They rolled into Dry Fork like they owned the place, laughing about the haunted river that ain't there. They pitched tents by the church ruins and filmed themselves daring each other to walk the riverbed at midnight. I watched from my truck on the ridge. Didn't stop them. Ain't my job to save fools from themselves. First night, nothing. Second night, something. They heard it. I saw the panic catch in them like brush fire. Heard them shouting through the dark. Heard the slap of bare feet running where no water. Waited. One of them, a kid with red sneakers, got halfway across before he froze. Just stopped, arms out, head cocked like he was listening to something none of the rest could hear. Then he smiled. Big, wide, empty. Stepped forward, disappeared. Not behind a bush, not into the scrub. Just down. Like the dirt opened under him and swallowed him whole. His footprints led right to that spot, pressed deep and wet-looking though the ground was dry as chalk. No prints after. The others tore out of town screaming, left their tents, their gear, everything. I waited till morning and went down myself. The spot where he vanished was darker than the rest. Like something had soaked up from below, something black and sticky. Smelled like rust and river rot, though there ain't been water. There in 50 years. Folks say Dry Fork used to run deep. Real deep. Spring-fed, cold as hell even in July. They say things swam up from under rocks older than the earth. Things with pale hands and mouths too wide. Things that learned to drown what couldn't swim fast enough. And when the water dried, those things didn't die. They just settled deeper, waiting for footsteps. They don't want much. Just one or two at a time. I stayed long enough to watch the ground smooth itself over, slow and deliberate, like mud closing over something soft. Red sneaker poked up once, then sank away. Gone by noon, people talk about Dry Fork sometimes still. They ask why nobody tries to rebuild, why there's no tourists, no markers, no signs pointing down Route 36. I tell them it's because water remembers. Because things born in deep places don't forgive being left behind, and because at night, when the moon swells up wrong and heavy, you can still hear the splashing closer than it should be and moving your way. Gideon's Fall wasn't the kind of place you ended up on purpose. It wasn't marked on maps anymore. Even the name itself had faded from the rusted green highway signs that once pointed travelers toward it. Now, it was just another ghost folded into the hills of Texas, buried under decades of red dirt, hard luck, and whispers that never quite died. Folks said the mine collapse in '52 had taken the heart right out of it. 37 men dead. 11 children, too, down there where they weren't supposed to be, playing in tunnels their fathers had warned them against. Some said they were just chasing each other, a game of hide-and-seek that turned to screams when the rock gave way. Others said something deeper in those caverns had called them down, something the grown-ups had disturbed when they dug too far. The town emptied fast. After that, what hadn't been crushed under stone was swallowed up by grief and ruin. The businesses shuttered, homes abandoned with clothes still hanging in closets and dishes still in sinks. Within 10 years, Gideon's Fall was nothing but a blight of broken windows and sagging roofs wrapped in barbed wire and silence. No one lived there. No one wanted to. But the stories, they never stopped. I didn't go looking for Gideon's Fall because I believed the stories. I went because I'd heard it might make good material. I'd been writing a book, one of those true crime meets urban legend collections that sell best when there's a little blood on the pages. Haunted Texas, forgotten places, that kind of thing. I thought I'd spend a week in there, snap a few photos of old buildings, maybe poke around the remains of the mine entrance if I could find it, then drive home and spin whatever I found into. Something spooky enough to sell. Getting there wasn't easy. The roads that once led in had buckled or vanished under brush. And even with GPS and satellite maps, I ended up taking a dirt track that scraped the undercarriage of my truck and seemed more likely to lead me to a hunting blind than a town. But eventually the trees thinned and I saw it, Gideon's Fall, slumped in a hollow between two crumbling hills, its bones still standing but rotted to near collapse. The sun was bleeding out when I pulled in. Orange light caught on broken glass, and sagging power lines painting everything in rust and shadow. I parked in what must have once been the town square, next to the twisted hulk of a merry-go-round frozen mid-spin. Beyond it, a row of storefronts stared back at me with hollow eyes. A barber shop, a five and dime, something that might have been a diner. The air smelled thick with dust and something older, something sweet and spoiled, like candy gone to rot. Got out, camera in hand, and the silence pressed in on me immediately. Not quiet, silence, no wind, no birds, not even the hum of insects. Just the sound of my own breathing and the soft tick of my engine cooling. I walked. I took pictures. Boarded up doors, splintered signs, the leaning skeleton of a schoolhouse, half swallowed by kudzu. Names carved into desks, initials scratched into lockers. A chalkboard still bore the faded outline of a hopscotch grid. I found myself humming as I moved through it all, a nervous habit. I think it was Ring Around the Rosie. I didn't notice the children until dusk fully settled. At first, I thought I'd imagine them. Just movement in the corner of my eye. Fleeting shapes darting behind door frames or peeking through broken windows. Small figures, too quick and silent for stray animals. But then I heard them laughter soft at first, almost like wind over bottles. Then clearer, sharper, giggling. The high-pitched squeal of tag and chase, little voices calling out in sing-song tones. "You can't catch me. Over here. No, over here." I froze outside the schoolhouse, heart pounding harder than it should have been. Rationality clawed at the edges of my fear. Maybe squatters. Maybe some locals' kids playing where they shouldn't be. But I hadn't seen another soul in miles, and these voices, they sounded wrong. Off. Like recordings played back just slightly too fast. "Come play with us," one of them said. Clear as glass from right behind me. I spun, camera raised like it could shield me. Nothing there, but the laughter rolled on, deeper into the town, toward the mine's black mouth yawning at the end of Main Street. The boards meant to bar it were shattered long ago. I could see the tunnel's throat gaping in the dark, swallowing the last light of day. I should have left. Every instinct screamed it. But something pulled me forward, step by slow step. Not curiosity, not fear. Something colder. Something that felt like memory scratching at the back of my skull. I realized dimly that I wasn't alone on the street anymore. They stood in the shadows between buildings, half-seen silhouettes of children. Boys in suspenders and girls in petticoats, their clothes decades out of step with the world beyond this ruin. Faces pale and soft, their eyes too dark, too empty. They didn't blink. They didn't breathe. They smiled. "Come play with us." They said again in perfect chorus. I backed toward my truck, hands trembling, keys already in my grip. But every step I took, they seemed to take two. Closer. Closer, until the world warped around me, the town stretching long and wrong, buildings leaning like teeth, the sky bleeding into itself. I could hear the mine now, something deep inside. It breathing slow and heavy, like lungs filled with stone. The children moved as one, toward me, around me, behind me, a circle tightening by the heartbeat. Their mouths opened wider than mouths should. Laughter poured out, thick and sharp, peeling. At the edges of sanity. "You can't leave," one said. A boy with a gap where his front teeth should have been, blood trickling from his ears. "You're it," whispered another, her hair floating as if underwater, her face splitting into something not a face at all. Cold hands closed around my wrists, my ankles, my throat, pulling me down. Down toward the cracked earth where bones pressed up through the soil like roots. I dropped the camera. I heard it break. I don't remember screaming. I remember the dark swallowing me, the tunnel mouth stretching wider, until it wasn't a mine anymore but a throat lined with rusted teeth. I remember falling into it, weightless and endless, the laughter chasing me down like wolves. They say no one leaves Gideon's Fall. Not really. The children you see aren't alive, and they don't want you to be either. Sometimes. If you stand at the edge of that ruined town as night sets in, you can hear them still. Little feet scuffing. Over gravel. Giggling in the dark. Calling to each other. Calling to you. Come play. You're it. It don't take much to spook folks in small Texas towns, especially the kind of towns where time stopped bothering to pass sometime around 1973. Pecan Hollow's one of those places. One gas station, 2 churches, and a diner that still sells. Coffee for 75 cents if you know to ask the waitress named Ruth. Everybody else is either too young to care or too old to leave. But what holds Pecan Hollow together, what keeps it on maps and whispered in neighboring towns, ain't the diner or the churches. It's the tree in the center of the square. The hanging tree, they call it, but only after dark and only if no preachers in earshot. In daylight it's just an old pecan tree, bent over like it's carrying the weight of every bad secret the town's too scared to say out loud. They say the last man to hang from it still does. Folks say his shadows Up there even when there's no wind to sway the branches. Kids dare each other to look, to stay past sundown and see him twisting slow as breath. Some see nothing. Some leave town shaking, faces pale, lips trembling. Not everybody talks about what they see. Not everybody can. The story goes like this. Back in '58, there was a man named Ellis Brandt, mean as a rattlesnake and twice as ugly. Lived alone in a shack just outside town, though he was often seen at the bar, nursing whiskey and sneering at anyone who looked at him too long. He worked odd jobs, fence mending, hay baling, things that kept him outside and away from decent folk. But trouble followed him like a stray dog, and when little Jenny Harper went missing one night, folks knew just where to look. Sheriff didn't even hesitate. Found her shoe near his well and didn't need to find the rest. Dragged Ellis into town, kicking and cursing, throwing spit and promises of revenge. Didn't wait for no trial. Didn't need one. A length of rope and that pecan tree, and Ellis Brandt swung till the sun came up blood red behind him. They left. Him there 3 days as a warning. By then his tongue had swollen purple and black, his face slack and greasy with flies, his boots missing because someone took them for luck. Third morning, someone cut him down and buried him in Potter's Field. Without a marker. Folks thought that'd be the end of it. It wasn't. The first to see him was Ruth herself, back when she was just a girl working late at the diner. Said she looked out across the square and there he was, hanging in the tree just like that night, swinging slow in a wind that wasn't there. The rope looked fresh, thick and rough as if just tied. His boots were back on his feet. Ruth blinked and he was gone. Word spread like rot in a root cellar. Others saw him too. A traveling salesman claimed he parked by the square and woke up to see the silhouette moving in the branches, spinning like a dead leaf. A deputy on patrol quit the force after his car stalled beneath that tree and something knocked at his window 3 times, slow and hollow. Said when he looked up, he saw a man's feet dangling inches from his windshield. Pecan. Hollow learned to leave the square alone at night. Shops closed early. The gas station shut off its lights. Even they. Churches held their revivals early enough to get folks home before sundown. Outsiders don't understand. They laugh at first. They say ghosts aren't real, that old stories don't bleed into daylight. But then they stay a night or two, and maybe they wander past the square. Maybe they see the way the branches bend. When there's no wind, the way shadows fall wrong beneath that tree. Some say Ellis ain't alone up there anymore. There've been others over the years. Drifters found hanging, suicides they called them even when the knots were tied too neat, too practiced. A boy who disappeared after graduation night, last seen walking toward the square on a dare. His mother still sets a place for him at Thanksgiving. His picture's still up in the post office, though the ink's gone blue and the corners curl. With age, they say if you stand beneath the tree at midnight, real still, you can hear the rope creak. Sometimes you hear more the breathy sound of someone choking, the scratch of boots against bark, the quiet thump of a body that won't ever touch the ground again. Some fools try to record it. Phones die. Batteries drain. The old ones say, it's better not to bring technology into matters of the dead. That tree don't want witnesses. Just respect. Every year, about the time leaves turn brittle and the wind smells like dust and endings, someone new comes through town asking questions. A writer, maybe. A ghost hunter with expensive equipment and more curiosity than sense. They stay at the motel out on 183, eat at Ruth's, make jokes about the hanging man. They always walk the square at night. They always leave fast if they leave at all. One man, from Austin maybe, said he'd crack the story wide open. Said Ellis Brandt wasn't the first to hang from that tree. Said there were records, old ones, yellow and brittle, of men strung up there back when the town was barely more than a crossroads and a promise. Claimed jumpers, cattle thieves, even a preacher accused of witchery. Said the tree had been fed blood long before Ellis, and it would keep needing to be fed long after. They found him in his motel room, rope burned deep around his throat, though. The door was locked from the inside and there wasn't a rope to be found. His eyes were wide open, mouth pulled into a grin like he'd seen something funny just before the end. They buried him in Potter's Field too. Folks don't talk about that much. Folks learn not to ask questions about the hanging man or the tree that cradles him still. The square's quiet now. Grass won't grow beneath that tree. Birds won't nest in its branches. Kids still dare each other to run beneath it, but none linger long. And when the sun sinks low and shadows stretch thin across cracked pavement, you can see him if you look. Sometimes just the feet. Sometimes the whole slow-turning shape of him, rope creaking, head bowed in silence or maybe listening for the next name to add. Beneath his own dot, it don't take much to spook folks in small Texas towns. Not when the tree still remembers the weight of rope. Not when the wind's dead still, but something up there keeps on swinging. El Dorado Bluffs isn't on any map anymore, though folks still tell stories about it if you're drunk enough and the bar's empty enough. It sits somewhere west of Wichita Falls, up near where the land starts to turn dry and stubborn. Back in the 60s, they built a trailer park up there, thinking they'd catch the overflow from the oil fields, cheap housing for roughnecks and drifters. For a while it worked. Folks came. Folks stayed. Folks vanished. Now nobody lives there, not really. You can find it if you know the roads and if you're fool enough to look for it. A dead-end spur off Farm Road 1912 will take you there, though. The signs are rusted flat and the asphalt's more pothole than pavement. It's a ghost of a place, half buried in mesquite and Johnson grass, with tumbleweeds stacked like bones against the sagging skirts of the trailers, but the lights never go out. Not real lights. Not power from any grid that's been live in 40 years. The trailers still hum with static glow from broken television sets. Screen snow lighting up empty, dust-choked rooms like pale lanterns. From the road you can see them, flickering shapes behind warped curtains. Screens humming without signal or purpose. People say if you look too close, you'll see something staring back at you through that noise. Something that notices when it's been noticed. That's what happened to Brian Ledbetter back in '92. He was a tow truck driver out of Vernon, working a late shift, picking up a Dodge with a cracked axle stranded out on the Bluffs Road. The driver had walked back to town, left the car sitting at a slant near the old cattle fence. Brian figured he'd hook it fast, maybe make it home in time to catch his wife before she passed out in front of the TV again. He got turned around. Though, said the road seemed to stretch out wrong, took him longer than it should have. By the time he found the car, night had swallowed the horizon. The lights from El Dorado Bluffs were floating on the hill ahead, soft and blue and flickering like candles under water. He should have left it. That's what he said later. Should have turned the rig around, hauled ass back down the road, left. The car to rot, but something pulled at him, he said. Like a hook through the chest, tugging him forward slow, step by step, until the tow truck was idling on the gravel lot and he was standing in the dark with those lights dancing in his eyes. First trailer he passed had its door open. The screen door hung limp on one hinge. Inside, the TV buzzed on a cinder block stand, throwing pale shapes across the rotted linoleum. Brian said he thought he saw people sitting there, silhouettes in busted recliners, faces turned to the screen, unmoving. But when he blinked, the furniture was empty. He kept going. Don't know why. Said it felt like gravity, like sleepwalking. Each trailer he passed was the same. TVS playing static, empty chairs, walls yellow with smoke and age. And something watching, not from inside the trailers. Not exactly. from inside the glow itself, behind the glass. Faces, maybe. Smiles pressed against the static like moths on a window pane. Brian made it to the last trailer before he came to himself. That one wasn't empty. The door swung open before he touched it, and something stepped out into the moonlight. Said it. Looked like a man at first, tall and thin, wearing what might have been coveralls, or skin so pale it hung like cloth. Its face wasn't right though. No mouth. No nose. Just eyes. Big and black and round like TV tubes gone bad. It reached for him. That's when he ran. He didn't stop running until he hit the main road. Left the truck. Left the Dodge. Left his keys somewhere in the dirt. They found him the next morning, wandering down 1912 barefoot, clothes torn up like he'd clawed his way through barbed wire. Wouldn't talk much after that. Not about what he'd seen. Just kept saying, over and over, the lights never go out. El Dorado Bluff stayed empty after that. Sheriff's deputies went up there once in '95 after some kids disappeared, thrill seekers. Looking for ghosts. Found the kid's car parked outside one of the trailers, doors open, headlights on. Found their phones smashed. Found the TV still burning static in every trailer. But no sign of the kids. Deputies said the place felt wrong. Said their radios didn't work up there. Said they heard voices through the static when they got too close to the screens. Whispering voices, calling names they recognized. Family. Friends. Folks long dead. Nobody's been up there official since. Unofficially, well, people still go. Teenagers mostly. Dare games. Urban legend bullshit. The smart ones leave quick. The dumb ones stay too long, try to prove how tough they are by staring into those screens, daring the faces to blink. Some say if you stare long enough, you'll see yourself on the other side. Not the you standing there, but the you that's been waiting. The you that already belongs. Old Hank Riles, who runs the bait shop out by Lake Camp, says he lost his boy up there in '03. Jason. Riles, nice kid. Bit wild. He and his buddies went up with a cooler of beer and a flashlight. They didn't come back. Search party found the truck a week later, half submerged in a cattle pond 3 miles from the bluffs. No sign of the boys. Just their boots. Lined up neat on the bank like they'd waited in barefoot. TV still running in the cab. Static on the screen, clear as day. Hank won't talk about it no more. Won't even drive that stretch of road. Says sometimes at night he can see the lights from his back porch, blue and soft like TV glow through curtains. Says he hears Jason's voice in the hum of dead channels, calling from somewhere he can't reach. They say the bluffs were built on bad ground. Old Comanche burial land, or maybe something older. They say there's things under the dirt that don't sleep. Things that remember when the land was red and screaming and full of blood. Things that learned how to hide in the dark behind glass. Doesn't matter now. Place is still there. Still waiting. If you go, and God help you if you do, don't. Look too long at the screens. Don't listen when they call your name. Don't answer back, because the lights never go out, and something's always watching. They said Marrow Creek was dying, but anyone with sense knew it had been dead for a long time. The sign on the highway still welcomed you like it hadn't caught on. Chipped and sun-faded, leaning just a little to the right like a drunk who hadn't made it home. Population, 612, it claimed. Though the last census had been 2 decades ago and half the mailboxes stood empty now, stuffed with yellowed flyers and wasp nests. The place sat about a half hour off Highway 71, down a thin, cracking road barely wide enough for 2 pickups to pass without kissing mirrors. Folks who ended up here usually didn't mean to. Folks who stayed had run out of places to run. The houses were what people noticed first. Even in daylight, something about them prickled at the back of your neck. The angles didn't sit right. The porches sagged like loose mouths, and the shutters hung crooked like blindfolds half pulled away. They leaned toward each other like they shared secrets. People whispered that Marrow Creek was built wrong from the start, settled on bones and blood. Not just the old Indian stories, though those were thick enough around here to fill books no one bothered to write. Something worse, something deeper, something still listening. The house on Potter's Bend was the worst. Folks avoided even looking at it if they could help it. Said the walls weren't built with wood alone. Said the man who built it in '34 went missing halfway through construction, and when they finally found him, weeks later, stuffed in a crawl space under what would become the sitting room, there wasn't a bone in his body unbroken. They finished it anyway. Materials were scarce in the Depression, and marrow makes glue, or so the old-timers liked to joke. Though no one laughed when they said it, I didn't believe any of it. Not really, not until I inherited the place. My Uncle Raymond died in there. Died alone, they said, though the coroner's notes hinted otherwise. Blunt force trauma, multiple fractures, but no signs of forced entry, no defensive wounds. Just a man folded in on himself like a crumpled piece of paper surrounded by walls that creaked and moaned when the wind touched them. I hadn't seen Raymond in years. He was the black sheep, the drunk, the one who stayed behind when everyone else got out. I figured I'd sign the papers, sell the place for whatever a dying husk of property could fetch, and leave without looking back. First mistake. I went inside. The key fought me, reluctant in the lock. The door breathed open like something exhaling. Stale air. Inside it smelled of rot and wet plaster, and beneath that, something older, something metallic and sweet like blood left too long in the sun. The floor sagged beneath my boots. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips like shed skin. I tried not to look at the stains on the ceiling or wonder how they got there. I should have left right then. Instead, I walked the house like a man, sleepwalking, each step pulling me deeper. The air pressed close. The silence wasn't silent. It ticked and groaned and whispered. A house settling, I told myself, though it sounded more like bone stretching after a long sleep. My uncle's things were still where he left them. An empty whiskey bottle on the knitstand, a half-finished crossword by the window, a smear of something dark beneath the sill, like a palm print dragged down the wall. I stayed the night. Second mistake. At first, it was the usual old house noises. Floorboards popping, pipes knocking, wind threading through the cracks. Then the whispers started, faint, slippery. Too quiet to catch, but loud enough you couldn't ignore them. Like voices behind a door you couldn't find. They moved with me, behind the walls, beneath the floor. In the hollows of the house, I told myself it was pipes, vermin, the house settling. I told myself a lot of things I didn't believe. Around midnight, the bedroom door swung shut on its own. Not slammed, just closed, soft and slow, like a hand guiding it. The walls creaked. The floor trembled. Something shifted in the corner where the shadows were thickest. Something watched. Sleep wasn't an option. I sat up with my back to the headboard, lights on, eyes fixed to the door. Sometime around 3, I heard it. A voice low and wet and crawling from between the cracks. Still here, still hungry. I thought I'd imagined it until the wall to my left bowed inward, just slightly, as though something behind it pressed close to listen. My breath froze in. My chest. I didn't move, didn't dare. The bulge in the plaster receded. A sigh followed, like disappointment. The next morning I packed my bags, or tried to. The suitcase wouldn't shut right. Something in it made the weight uneven. I pulled out my clothes one by one until I found it at the bottom, a bone small and white and fresh, still sticky. Nestled there like a keepsake, I burned the suitcase. Third mistake. I stayed another night. I told myself it was exhaustion. Delirium, stress. I told myself the whispers couldn't follow me when the sun was up, but night falls quick in Marrow Creek and darker than it ought to. The second night the house woke hungrier. The whispers grew teeth. They circled me, beneath. Floorboards, behind the cracked plaster, slipping through vents and sockets. They knew my name now. Stay a while, stay forever. The ceiling groaned. A crack split the plaster like a grin. Dust sifted down like dandruff. Something behind the wall laughed, soft and wet and close. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. Morning never seemed to come. When I finally forced myself to leave, it wasn't morning at all. The clock said 8. The sky said nothing. The air pressed close like damp cloth. I drove without looking back. The rear view showed me things I refused to see, the house standing straighter, the shutters opening like eyes. I checked into a motel 30 miles away, slept with the lights on. When I woke, there were handprints on the inside of the mirror. Small boneless dot, they followed me. Everywhere I go now. The walls murmur. The floors shift beneath my feet. Sometimes when I turn, too quick, I catch the shape of something crawling just out of sight. I thought distance would matter. I thought state lines, highways, other towns would protect me. I was wrong. The house isn't wood and nail alone. It's bone and blood and marrow. It remembers. It hungers. And it doesn't forgive. Some nights. I wake up with plaster dust on my tongue. Some nights my teeth ache like they're loosening. Some nights I hear it, right behind the walls. Still here. Still hungry. Still waiting. Barrow Hill wasn't on any map, not even the old ones. You couldn't find it unless it wanted you to. That's what old Leonard Dill used to say, and he'd lived out by the crossroads near it all his life, long enough to see the first stone rise up through the earth like a rotted tooth breaking the gum line. Back then there'd been no fence, no road signs, nothing but the hill and the hush around it. Not quiet like peace, more like something holding its breath beneath the soil, waiting. Folks didn't talk about Barrow Hill unless drink loosened their tongues or grief twisted their guts. Even then, it was whispers only, glances over shoulders, prayers said to no God anyone trusted anymore. Because Barrow Hill wasn't a place you could fix with a preacher or a shotgun or even fire. Plenty had tried. There were stories about that too. No one was ever buried there, not at first. That was the truth of it. Not one body put in the ground by human hands. But the stones came anyway. First one, then another, then more. Flat gray slabs like slate, rising up crooked as bad teeth. Names etched deep in a language nobody recognized. Not Spanish, not English, not even Latin. Just marks, long and sharp. Like claw scratches turned to words. Leonard saw the first stone the summer he turned 12. His dog went running off through the mesquite and didn't come back, not even when Leonard hollered himself hoarse. He found the mutt curled up dead at the base of the hill, stiff as iron and eyes wide like it had seen hell open. Right next to it, a slab of stone, still half sunk in the dirt but already bleeding letters across its face. Leonard didn't read them, not really. Said it felt like they read him. People went missing sometimes. That's the other thing about Barrow Hill. Not often, not regular like clockwork, but enough. A ranch hand, a drifter, a kid dared too far on a hot daredevil night. Gone, just gone. And then maybe a month or a year later, another stone up. Sometimes fresh dirt, sometimes an open hole like the earth yawned wide in the night and forgot to close its mouth. Folks would nail the fences tighter, hang crosses on every post, even tried salt and iron once. Didn't make a lick of difference. Leonard grew old watching that place, drinking cheap bourbon and counting stones. Said they moved sometimes. Said the hill was bigger now than when he was a boy. Higher, fatter, like something swelling beneath it, growing hungry and restless. Trees wouldn't root on it. Grass turned brown fast as it sprouted. Just dirt and stones and silence. Birds didn't land there. Animals didn't graze near it. Even the wind seemed to cut a wide path around. I didn't believe half of it, not until I saw it myself. I was passing through, headed west on my way to nothing special. My truck threw a rod near Dill's place, and he gave me a ride into town. On the way back out, he started talking about the hill like it was an old friend with cancer. Said he didn't. Have long left himself, but the hill, oh, the hill would outlive every damn thing breathing. It grows, boy, he told me. Not fast, not loud, but sure. Like rot, like rust. Like bones stacked deep enough make their own gravity. I thought he was crazy. Just some desert-struck old man with too much whiskey and too little company. But then we rounded a bend and I saw it. Barrow Hill, rising out of the dust like a boil on the skin of the earth. Covered in stones now, dozens of them, leaning and crumbling and standing sharp against the sky. Some tall as me, some barely knuckled out of the dirt. And between them, open patches of earth like mouths waiting. Leonard pulled the truck over, killed the engine. Didn't say a word for a long minute. You listen close now, he said finally, staring straight ahead. They'll call your name if you linger. Soft at first, sweet as home. Don't answer, I laughed. I shouldn't have. That night, holed up in the trailer Leonard let me use, I heard something. Thought it was wind at first or coyotes pacing close. But the sound was wrong, softer. Wet, like something dragging fingers through mud. I opened the door and stepped out barefoot. Gravel cut my feet, but I didn't feel it, not then. The hill was closer, it had moved, I swear it. In the moonlight it looked bigger, closer to the fence. Line, stones gleaming pale and slick like bones after rain. I could see the holes too, deeper now, black as pitch. And I heard it, my name, faint but clear as church bells. Come on down. Just a little while, rest. I went back inside, locked the door. Pushed the couch against it like that would matter. Didn't sleep, not really. Just waited for dawn, for light, for something to feel sane again. When morning came, Leonard was gone, his truck too. Just his house sitting empty, doors hanging wide. And on the hill, a new stone. Fresh dirt piled neat. Letters sharp and wet, Leonard Dill. Born 1943. Died. There was no date, just the word still beneath it. I didn't stick around. Got the truck running on spit and wire and drove until the sun set somewhere. Far enough away the land felt different under my tires. But even now, some nights when the wind dies and the world goes still as breath held too long, I swear I hear it again. Come on down. There's always room. They say the hill's bigger now. They say new stones rise faster. No one plants them, no one carves the names. But they're always true, always waiting, and the graves, well, sometimes they open themselves, sometimes things climb out. Not people. Not anymore. Just shapes wearing skin like bad clothes, looking for someone soft enough to answer back when the dirt calls. I don't go west anymore. I don't take lonely roads. And I sure as hell don't stop for hills that weren't there the day before. Barrow Hill don't need directions to find you. It just waits. And it's got all the time in the world. There's a road outside of Lubbock they don't bother to put on the maps anymore. Locals know it. Folks who've been around a long time know it. Dunwich Fork, they used to call it. A brittle stretch of cracked two-lane highway that splits. North into cotton fields long abandoned to thistle and ghost grass. Nothing grows right out there. Nothing lives right, either. The story goes that Dunwich Fork used to be a proper little township. Grain silos, a feed store, one of those gas stations, with a hand-painted sign offering Dr. Pepper and Chesterfields. People lived there. Kids played there. Churches rang their bells on Sundays, and the diner served chicken fried steak, so greasy it leaked through the wax paper to your lap. But that was a long time ago. Now it's just husks of buildings leaning into the wind like old drunks at closing time, sagging into themselves, rotting out from the inside. Tin roofs peeled back like blistered skin. Houses where front doors hang by a single hinge and porches buckle under the weight of memory. They say there ain't a living soul left in Dunwich Fork. Not since '79, when the last of the families packed up and left after a rash of deaths too strange to explain. Children disappearing. Cattle eviscerated and left in neat spirals like something out of a preacher's bad dream. One woman found curled inside her own freezer, smiling wide enough to split her cheeks open. Sheriff blamed it on drugs. The locals blamed it on the land. No one mentions the faces, unless you press them. Unless you buy them a drink and promise not to laugh. Then maybe they'll tell you how sometimes, if you drive through after dark, you'll catch sight of pale shapes in the upper windows of those sagging old houses, watching. Faces like wax, pulled too thin over bone, with holes where eyes ought to be. Faces that don't blink. Faces that smile. Tourists who try to camp out. They don't stay long. Batteries drain. Phones stop working. Engines die. More than one city kid's been found walking the road back toward town with their feet bloody from broken glass, muttering about the things in the windows. And sometimes, they're still smiling when you find them. I heard about it first from my uncle, the way kids hear about places they aren't supposed to go. He worked oil rigs out of Midland, used to drink too much and tell stories he shouldn't. Said he lost a buddy out there once, a man named Cray who thought he was too big and too smart for ghost stories. They went driving through Dunwich Fork on a dare. This was back in '94, long after the town was supposed to be nothing but splinters and dust. They parked outside one of the old farmhouses, the one with the rusted swing set still out back like bones sticking out of the earth. Cray said he wanted to take a leak, wandered off into the dark with his flashlight dancing weakly over broken fence posts and the yawning black of doorways. He didn't come back. Uncle waited, called out, got mad, got scared. Finally went looking, and found the flashlight lying in the dirt, still on, pointing at the house's porch steps. Said there were footprints in the dust going up, but none coming down. Said the door was standing open like a mouth waiting to swallow something whole. Uncle drove back to town white-knuckled, and Cray was never seen again. Of course, that's just a story. But stories have roots, and the ones around Dunwich Fork run deep. I didn't believe any of it until last summer when I went looking for it myself. Not out of bravery, out of boredom maybe. Out of something mean in me that needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I told myself I was doing research. I told myself I was collecting material for a book. I packed a bag. Flashlight, camera, spare. Batteries. Took my old Ford and drove west with the sun bleeding out behind me like something dying slow. Took me the better part of a day to find the turnoff. A cracked lip of asphalt almost hidden under creeping vines and dirt. No sign. No marker. Just a feeling like stepping off the edge of something old and deep. I drove slow. Windows down. Radio off. The world felt wrong out there, like I'd slipped sideways into some thinner version of reality. Trees leaned too close. Fences unraveled themselves in spirals. Crows perched silent on wires strung over nothing. The town itself came into view. The way sickness creeps in, gradual, inevitable. First the gas station, its pumps gutted and glass teeth glittering in the cracked windows. Then the feed store, slumped sideways like it was trying to lie down and die. Houses beyond, pale under the bruised sky. I parked by the diner, the sign still swinging on its rusted chain though there wasn't any wind. Got out, walked. Listen. Nothing. Not. Birds, not bugs. Not even the sigh of wind through grass. I snap pictures. Doors ajar. Curtains that move just slightly as if stirred by breath from inside. That's when I notice them. Upper windows mostly. Shapes standing still, watching. Faces. White. Hollow, smiling, not reflections. Not tricks of light. I saw them. One blinked. I told myself to go. I told myself to turn around, get back in the truck, and drive until I couldn't see those crooked rooftops in my mirror anymore, but something held me there. A sound, maybe. A whisper under my feet, rising from the cracked pavement like heat. A voice in a language I didn't recognize but understood anyway. Welcome. That's what it said. Welcome home. I backed away. I turned. My truck was gone. Not just moved, gone. Vanished. Like it had never been there at all. Behind me. Footsteps. Bare, soft, slow. I didn't look back. Not right then. I ran. Into the fields. Into the dark. Through stalks of dead corn that scraped at my skin like fingers trying to pull me down. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. When I finally looked back, the town was closer, not further. Houses leaning in toward me like conspirators. Windows blinking open like eyes. Smiling mouths widening. The things were coming, not fast. Not loud, just steady. I could see them now, stepping from doorways and porches. Faces pale as chalk, eyes hollowed through. Smiles splitting wider than mouths were meant to. They don't rush, they don't chase. They don't need to. They follow. They wait, and sooner. Or later, you stop running. They've been with me ever since. In reflections, in glass. In dark corners just at the edge of sight. Watching, smiling, waiting. Sometimes, I wake up and find footprints at the foot of my bed. Dusty bare, and pointed toward the pillows. Sometimes I hear them in the walls. Whispering. Welcome home. And I think about going back to Dunwich Fork, because I don't think they'll stop until I do. Even in the middle of the worst Texas drought anyone could remember, Whippoorwill Falls still got rain. The map showed it, bone dry in every direction for miles, yellow and scorched, but that one little patch just east of the Sabine River was always this faint shade of blue, like a bruise that wouldn't heal. A pinprick on the radar where the clouds never moved on, never passed over to share their water with the rest of the thirsty land. The old farmers who'd grown up there said it had always been like that, back even before the highway split the county in two, always raining. Not a lot, not enough to flood or wash anything away. Just enough to keep everything damp, keep the dirt black and the grass slick beneath your boots. Just enough to keep the sky low and heavy and the air smelling like something rotten beneath all that clean wet. Nobody moved to Whippoorwill Falls. Folks either got born there or got stuck there, and the ones that got stuck usually had a reason. They couldn't leave. Debts, family, shame. Some just didn't have the gas money to make it past the county line. My Uncle Ray was one of those. He'd lived out there since '84, out on the north edge where the road turns to gravel and the trees start leaning in too close over the ditches. His trailer wasn't much to look at, old rust-bitten airstream with green algae creeping up the seams like veins under skin. Said he liked the quiet. Said he liked the rain. I hadn't been back in years. Not since my mother died, and there wasn't any more reason to come poking around that part of the family tree. But when Uncle Ray went missing, the sheriff called me. Didn't ask me exactly. Just told me I was next of kin and it was my mess to deal with now. Said they'd gone out looking after neighbors, reported the place smelling wrong even from the road, but they hadn't found a body. Just the trailer locked up from the inside, lights still burning. Coffee burned to tar in the pot and the TV, hissing static like something was breathing slow and deep on the other end of the wires. Left the door unlocked for me. That's the kind of law they've got in Whippoorwill Falls. It was raining when I drove in. Not hard, just that steady, fine mist that soaks you through without you noticing until it's too late. The kind that makes the world look blurry. Around the edges, like the trees and the road and the sagging telephone poles were all softening into watercolors. My tires hissed on the wet gravel, the windshield wipers giving up halfway through each sweep. Ray's trailer sat right where I remembered, half sunken in mud and ringed with weeds so thick they might have been trying to pull it under. The door hung crooked on one hinge now, swinging a little in the breeze. There wasn't any sign of forced entry, but I could feel something standing just past the threshold, waiting. Not a person. Not anything with a shape you'd recognize. Just the kind of cold that soaks through your teeth and makes your stomach. Forget how to unclench. Inside, it was worse. The lights were still on, flickering slow and sickly like breath catching in a throat. The air smelled like rain and rot and something else underneath it all. Something sour, like metal gone bad in your mouth. On the kitchen table sat an old tape recorder, the kind Ray always used to ramble into when he'd been drinking. Next to it, a notebook, pages bloated with damp and covered in handwriting so cramped it looked like the ink itself had gotten anxious. The last entry wasn't finished. Just a sentence trailing off halfway across the page. It's under the skin now. Not just mine, the ground bleeds too. You see it when the rain comes, can't stop it coming through. Can't stop it taking. Something had pressed bloody fingertips into the edge of the paper. 5 perfect prints sinking deep into the pulp of the page. I picked up the recorder, thumbed it on. Static. A long stretch of nothing but the hiss of rain, the faint crack of thunder somewhere far off. Then, beneath it, Ray's voice, low and shaking and not quite right. "It don't sleep," he said. I thought maybe it just wanted feeding. I thought maybe it was hungry like the earth gets hungry, but it ain't about that. It wants you wet, wants you soft, wants you ready. You dry out, you get free. That's why it rains here. That's why it's always raining. Keeps you soft, keeps you from getting out. Silence. Then the sound of something moving in the dark, something thick and slow dragging itself closer to the microphone. Not footsteps, not claws. Just the sound of something heavy shifting under wet earth. I turned it off. In the bathroom, the mirror was cracked down the middle, and the crack wept water in a thin, constant trickle, even though the glass was dry to the touch. I leaned in to look closer, and the light behind me bent wrong, stretching my reflection's mouth too wide, pulling the eyes into pits that went on forever. I didn't stay the night. I didn't even stay an hour. I took the notebook and I left. Drove out through that rain that never stopped. Watched the world grow clearer mile by mile until my rear view went from fog to dark to clean. I should have kept going. I should have burned the notebook, thrown the recorder in the deepest part of the Sabine, and forgot every word of it. But I didn't. I read the rest. I listened again, and the rain started creeping closer. Not hard, not fast. Just a little more every day. A little more leaking in through the cracks of places it shouldn't reach. A little more under doors I know I locked, windows I know I shut, water pooling where no pipe's broken, damp spreading like bruises under wallpaper. And at night, when it's quiet enough, I hear it moving. Slow, heavy, closer. They said Ray went missing. They never said what he looked like when he left. Never said if what's wearing his skin now is still him. It's raining now. It's not supposed to be. I'm 300 miles from Whippoorwill Falls, and it's raining in my kitchen. The sky can't forget. And neither can I. Havers Mill sits 3 miles south of town, where the 2-lane blacktop buckles and crumbles into a ribbon of dirt road that leads to nowhere. Folks who've been around long enough still call it the Mill Road, even though the mill itself hasn't run since sometime around 1953, back when most of this part of Texas still looked the same as it had 50 years before. The building itself is a big hulking thing of rotted timber and rusted iron, leaning sideways into a mess of old cottonwoods that grew up around it like crooked teeth. Nobody goes out there anymore, least not unless they're drunk or looking for trouble. There are stories about it. Sure, every town's got places like that, but the stories about Havers Mill don't sound like the usual ghost stories. They sound like warnings. It was old man Brody who first told me about the screams. I was 17, maybe 18, working nights at the gas station on the edge of town, the one that still had the old rotating Gulf sign out front, even though it hadn't been a Gulf station in 20 years. Brody came in around midnight most nights, bought himself a pack of Camels and a can of Coke, and stood around jawing just long enough to make you wonder if he had anywhere else to be. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand, had a thick yellow scar that cut across his cheek like something out of a prison fight, and smelled like old tobacco and motor oil. One night, for no reason I can remember, I asked him if the stories about the mill were true. Brody just laughed, this raspy sound like gravel in a tin bucket. Said, "You think the ground don't remember what you feed it, boy?" He tapped his cigarette against the counter and stared out at the empty night through the dusty glass. That place got shut down for a reason. Haver was a bastard. Worsen. People knew. Ground ate what he gave it. Still hungry, far as I can tell. I laughed it off at the time. Kid stuff. Ghost stories. But it stuck with me. The way he said hungry. Like it wasn't just some old machinery rotting in the dirt out there. Like the land itself could still want something. Years went by. I moved away for a while. Came back because that's what you do when the road runs out and there ain't nothing waiting for you anywhere else. Gas station was gone. New developments going up on the north side, but Mill Road stayed the same. Crooked, empty, baking in the sun. And Havers Mill still leaning into those trees, waiting. It was 2 months ago when I heard the sounds for myself. I wasn't looking for them. Hell, I wasn't even thinking about the place anymore. I was just driving home from my brother's late, a little drunk, too tired to take the long way around. Thought I'd cut through, save myself 10 minutes. Night was thick, moon hanging low and yellow behind clouds. Radio was dead, some busted wire under the dash. So it was just me and the tires humming over gravel. First thing I noticed was the way the air changed. Got colder. Not cool like night air in October, but cold. Deep down in the bone like the middle of February. My breath fogged up in front of me. Then I felt it, the hum, not the road. Not the engine. Deeper than that. Underneath. Like something. Turning, slow and steady, far below my wheels. I pulled over without meaning to. Just stopped right there in the dirt, engine ticking quiet. Lights caught the edge of the mill through the trees. Boards warped and broken, one of the big iron wheels half sunk into the earth like a rotten tooth. I should have driven on. Should have turned around. But something about that hum, that low grinding pulse under the tires, pulled at me. I got out. Stood there with the door hanging open, listening. No wind. No crickets. Just that slow, steady churn beneath my boots, like a gear catching on bone. And underneath it, something else. A sound not meant to be heard above ground. Screaming. Faint. At first, like water moving through pipes. Then rising, stretching out long and ragged like something pulled through the dark with its throat wide open. Not human, not exactly, but close enough that my stomach turned over on itself. I don't remember walking toward the mill, but I must have. Next thing I knew, I was standing at the old loading dock, board soft underfoot, air thick with the stink of mold and iron and something sweet gone bad. The door hung half open, hinges rusted into stillness. Beyond it, blackness so thick my flashlight barely cut a hole in it. Inside, the place was a ruin. Machinery rusted solid, belt loops sagging like dead snakes, piles of rotten grain scattered across the floor in little gray islands. But the sound came from below, through the cracks in the boards, through the old grain chute that dropped down into the earth where the foundations had collapsed decades ago. I knelt there, light trembling in my hand, and pressed. My ear to the boards, beneath me, the grind of metal against stone, the slow churn of something impossibly huge turning in the dark, and voices. Not just one, 100, maybe more, all rising and falling together like some choir pulled screaming from the bottom of the world. I don't know how long I stayed there. Long enough for the cold to climb up my legs and settle into my chest. Long enough for the flashlight to flicker and die, leaving me crouched in blackness thick as tar. Long enough to feel something pressing up against the boards beneath my palm. Not metal, not dirt, something soft. Something that moved. I ran. Didn't look back until the car door slammed behind me and the engine roared to life like salvation. Didn't breathe proper until I was halfway back to town with the radio. Hissing static and my headlights carving holes through the night, tried to forget it. Told myself it was the drink. The dark. My brain pulling tricks out of old stories Brody told me. But then I started hearing it again, not out there, in town. Late at night, lying in bed with the lights off and the wind pushing against the windows. That same low grind beneath the floorboards. That same distant screaming, rising slow like something remembering its hunger. Neighbors started hearing it too. First the old folks on the edge of town, then folks closer in. Pipes rattling, walls humming, floors vibrating underfoot. One woman said she saw something crawling up through the drain in her cellar, something pale and long-fingered and blind. Said it whispered to her before it slipped back down into the dark. Brody's gone now. Found him last week out on Mill Road, truck. Idling in the ditch, driver's door open. No sign of him. Just drag marks through the dirt leading toward the mill. I ain't been back. Won't go? Not for love or money. But I hear it still, under me, behind me, in the walls and the wires and the places where the earth runs deep. Havers. Mill don't need to run no more. It's running just fine beneath us, grinding slow, grinding steady, and it's still hungry. They say Pine Needle Gulch wasn't always like that. Back before the dam went up in the 40s and the river rerouted, back when it was just cattle country and scrappy juniper woods, people could wander through that shallow ravine and come out. The other side with nothing worse than burrs stuck to their socks. But something changed. Old-timers blame the Army Corps of Engineers. Others point at the sinkhole collapse that happened in '58, swallowing up a whole survey crew and leaving. Nothing but a soft, weeping patch of earth and a stink like boiled eggs. Nobody agrees on the reason. What they do agree on is this: maps twist there, compasses break, GPS glitches. And folks who walk in circles sometimes come out again, but not all of them come out human. I heard about it from my cousin Mark, who heard about it from his ex-girlfriend's brother, whose cousin's buddy swore his uncle went missing out there in '97. That's the kind of story it is. Chain-of-mouth folklore, whispered at cookouts and passed around beer coolers on tailgates. But enough people know someone who knows someone that you start thinking, maybe there's something to it. I didn't give it much thought until I moved back to Texas after the divorce. Too many ghosts in the apartment. Too much quiet. My head wasn't right and the bottle wasn't helping. Mark took me out there one evening on a dare. He said we'd go in together and come out together. Swore. Up and down it'd be just like hiking through any other patch of cedar-choked hill country. They make it sound worse than it is. Locals love their ghost stories. His grin was wide and loose and I didn't trust it. But I didn't want to seem scared in front of him either. We parked off a dirt road barely wide enough for my truck. Sun was burning down red behind the ridge, bleeding through the tangled black fingers of the trees. Everything smelled sharp with dry pine and dust. Somewhere a whippoorwill was calling, thin and lonely. The mouth of the gulch didn't look like much. Just a dip in the land, stitched with juniper and yucca and the odd twist of post oak. No sign, no marker. Just a place the land seemed to sag in on itself. My phone's GPS pinwheeled uselessly. Compass in my pack spun lazy as a drunkard. See? Mark laughed. It's all magnetics, geology crap. Nothing spooky. We went down together, boots crunching old needles, breath already sticky with heat. Paths weren't clear, not really. Game trails mostly. Deer hog, raccoon. They wove in and out, vanishing, reappearing, curling in ways that made no sense if you thought too hard about them. After a mile or so, I realized I wasn't sure which direction the truck was anymore. East, Mark said, pointing vaguely at the darkening sky. Keep east, can't go wrong. We kept walking and walking. Trees leaned in thicker. Shadows puddled under them like oil. I swear the temperature dropped 10 degrees, though the air was dead still. Somewhere ahead, a creek gurgled soft and sly. Only thing was, we'd crossed no creek coming in. I said so to Mark. He shrugged. Must be underground springs. New since the rains last year, but his voice wasn't as sure as before. His grin didn't reach his eyes anymore. He kept looking behind us like he expected to see someone following. We came to a split. Both ways looked the same, rough, root-chewed trails half choked in brush. Mark picked left. I hung a piece of orange flag tape on a branch like I'd been taught hunting to mark our way back. 15 minutes later, we hit another split. Same deal. I flagged it. We kept on. But when we came back around, and I swear we came back around, because there was my piece of orange tape fluttering limp on its branch, the split wasn't the same. The trail markers were different. Stones stacked like teeth. Little bundles of twigs tied in knots. Things that hadn't been there 20 minutes before. Things that hadn't been left by us. That's when Mark stopped talking. Just nodded when I pointed, eyes dark and pinched. We both heard it then, a voice, or maybe just breath, moving through the trees behind us. Whisper soft, slow, not words. Exactly, but not quite wind either. We picked up pace without meaning to dot another hour, maybe two. It got hard to tell. Phone dead. Compass spinning. Stars came out wrong, in shapes I didn't recognize. Trees leaned closer, branches clawing at. Hats and shoulders like hands. Trails looped tighter. Ground grew soft underfoot, then hard again, then soft. Something under the soil squirmed weightly. I stopped looking for the truck and started hoping. Just for dawn dot, at one point we thought we saw headlights through the trees. Pale globes flickering, steadying, then moving sideways, not forward, not back. Just drifting parallel to us, deeper in. Mark whispered, "We should follow. Might be a road." I didn't think so. I didn't think headlights should float. But fear will do strange things to your good sense. We followed. Light led us to a clearing, small, circular. Trees leaned in like walls. In the center stood a shape, man-sized, wrapped in bark and moss, face smooth as river stone, no eyes. No mouth, just a blankness where features should be. It turned toward us, though it had no face to turn. And behind us, in the trees, more shapes stirred. Not walking. Unfolding. Mark screamed. Bolted right. I bolted left. I heard him crashing, then silence. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. I don't know how long I ran. The woods stretched, warped, twisted. Trails vanished underfoot. My breath burned. My chest split with fear. When I stumbled out, if I stumbled out, it wasn't where we'd gone in. It was dawn, pale and sour, and I stood by a fence I didn't recognize next to a road I'd never seen. My clothes were torn, my boots soaked through though there'd, and no rain. My pack was empty. Not just missing gear, hollow, bottomless. I dropped it. Left it there. A farmer picked me up. Said I was 15 miles south of where I'd started. Said I looked wrong, though he wouldn't say how. Just kept glancing at me in the mirror like he half expected me to melt that I told him about Mark. Search parties went in. Dogs refused. Locals laughed quiet and said they never come out the same. They found nothing. No pack, no prints, no sign of where he'd gone. Months later, I heard stories. A hiker saw someone like Mark, thin, pale, eyes wrong, smiling too wide, standing still in the shadows just past the trail, watching, waiting. Don't go near Pine Needle Gulch anymore, not even close. Roads buckle out there, maps twist. And sometimes, if you listen hard, you'll hear someone breathing just beyond the trees. Not words exactly, just hunger learning how to speak.